Welcome to the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. This is episode 1, Ankh Gods of Egypt. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
In case you missed episode 0, or if we haven't released it yet, we're a group of friends from Colorado who love playing board games and love talking about it, so we decided to start a podcast. In our first episode, we're going to kick it off with what we've been playing lately. Then we'll get to our feature review, Ankh Gods of Egypt, starting with a rules overview from Kevin. We'll then talk about what we like and dislike about Ankh, as well as give our final thoughts and ratings. And since Ankh is an area control game, we'll do our top 5 lists of area control games. To close it out, we'll then talk about the new games and other things we're excited about in our board gaming world. This is the basic format that we're going to go with as we get the podcast off the ground, and I'm sure we'll tweak it a little bit, but we're excited about this. We hope you enjoy it. We're all new at this, so please bear with us. And with that, we'll start it off by talking about what we've been playing lately. Kevin, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing a mix of games lately. I got together recently with my family, and whenever I get together with my family, we play a lot of lighter games, what many people call filler style, right? One of those was a game called Cockroach Poker. Cockroach Poker it's a bluffing game. It's a super simple game. It's kind of in the same vein as a Skull, if you've played Skull before. So in Cockroach Poker, you have a deck of cards, and there are various bugs in this deck. Cockroaches, scorpions, stink bugs. There's 8 of each of these bugs in the deck. You deal out all the cards to the players. You look at your cards, and then whoever's starting takes one of their cards, puts it face down, and then slides it to somebody else on the table. And they say what that card is. So they could say, you could slide a card and say, this is a scorpion. So the person you slide it to then has a choice. They can either say agree or disagree, or they can take that card, look at it, and then pass it to somebody else on the table, and then they say what that card is. So they could say, it's a stink bug. It doesn't have to be what the person said that passed it to you. You could be completely lying, but at any time, a person can say agree or disagree until it gets to the last player, and then they're forced to agree or disagree. So if you agree with somebody and it is that, then the person who passed it to you gets the card. If you disagree, then the person that disagreed that was wrong or agreed and was wrong gets that card in front of them. That's the whole game. It's super simple. 4 of the same bug in front of you, then you lose and everybody else wins. So what I like about this game is seeing the dynamic around the table, trying to guess what people are doing, right? Seeing trends, like this person always sends me a card and they say agree. So, or they say what it is. I'm going to agree with that and give it back to them, type of thing. And that whole dynamic and the bluffing dynamic, you're laughing the whole time. It's just a really fun game, super simple game. And, like I said, it's filler. It doesn't take too long to play.
So you're just trying to avoid holding on to the cards, right?
That's it. Yep.
This sounds like a game I've heard of Cockroach Poker before. I've heard it talked about a couple of times, and it's one that I think would be right up my alley as far as a filler game.
So yeah, getting in people's head is the whole game, and I think that's kind of awesome. That's basically what you like to do. Right?
Oh, and you compared it to Skull, and I've only played Skull one time, but we had a board game weekend a year ago or so, and we played that, and that was exactly that. I love that getting in your head kind of experience. And yeah, I'm interested in trying this one out.
Yeah, I mean, I compare the two because I play the two quite a bit. And I think I like Skull just a little bit better. But, Cockroach Poker is not far behind as far as bluffing games go.
Did you say when it came out? Or is it an older game? Or
it is. I think it is an older game. I'd have to look it up. But I think it's been around for a while.
Cool.
Yep. 2004.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
That's almost as old as Tyson.
That is not even
That is true.
Hilarious.
Tyson is the baby of the group, right?
He is.
So it's nice to get that younger generation's opinion.
I feel like I'm not in the middle, but I'm
You're not in the middle. What are you? What
Well,
are you
yeah, I
talking
mean,
about?
like 4
Oh, you
years.
think I'm the grandpa of the group? Is that
No,
what-
I mean, Dan's the oldest, I would say.
Oh, Dan.
Well, see, I
old is
play with
Dan?
both of you and all of our group because being the youngest, it's nice to play with senile people who don't really remember what they're doing very well. So.
Whoa. Shots fired.
It does.
Oh, shots fired.
It does slow down our games a little bit when we have to explain pop culture references to Tyson from the 80s and 90s. But
Right.
Sure.
You know.
If you say so. Anyway, so something I've been playing lately that I'm really excited about, that I've really enjoyed, is Cryptid. Cryptid is designed by Hal Duncan and Ruth Vevers, and the art, which is limited in this game, is by one of my favorite artists, Kwanchai Moria. So I just wanted to point that out. But it's published by Osprey Games. Now, I love deduction and reasoning games, and that's what this game is. If you ever played Clue and you're trying to figure out who done it type of thing, or exactly what all the clues are, this is the version of Clue that I would have wanted it to be. So in Cryptid, you are a zoologist. Or sorry, you are a cryptozoologist, which is a key difference because you're looking for a cryptid. Those who may not know what a cryptid is, think of Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, the Abominable Snowman, Chupacabra, Jersey Devil, etc., etc., etc. These cryptids are hiding in this game, and you're trying to locate them. So essentially what the game is there is a deck of cards, and I'd say there's probably 50 or 60 cards in there. And each game you're going to draw one single card. And this card is going to tell you what your setup for the game is. So on one side of the card, it shows you a map, and you have in the game 6 different tiles with little hex spaces on them. And each space, I think, has somewhere between like 20 and 30 hexes on it. So you can imagine that you're getting a lot of spaces on the board. And that card that you draw is going to set up the board in a way that there is only one single space in the entire map where the cryptid is. And your goal in the game is to figure out where that space is. I don't know how the designers did this because it would require a ton of math. And like I said, there's like 50 or 60 cards in that deck. So you're going through each game will use a different card. And on the back of the card, you have clues. So you have a reference for whatever player count you have. So it can be played from 3 to 5 players. So if you're playing a 3-player game, you look on the back of the card and see the clues that are given in a 3-player game. And each person gets a pamphlet thing that has a list of clues in there, and on the back of the card it says number 27 or something like that. And so say Kevin has number 27 as his clue. He'll open his pamphlet, read the clue, and the clue will tell him one thing that he knows about it. The whole game is you are trying to work together in a way to discover where the cryptid is without giving too much information to your compatriots, because you're all kind of cooperative and nice and working together as cryptozoologists. You're the only ones who believe in this cryptid. Not the rest of the world doesn't believe in Bigfoot, so you got to work together. But you got to make sure that you're not giving too much information to everybody else, because you want to be the cryptozoologist who makes the discovery of Bigfoot. So the whole game is you can do one of two things. You can either search or ask a question to a neighboring, or to anybody else at the table. So essentially, if I asked Tyler a question, I would say, Tyler, and I would point at the map, and I'd say, Tyler, could the cryptid be in this location? And it's just a could. So you would ask yes or no, and you'd place a disc or a cube on the board indicating yes or no. So the board kind of fills up with these cubes and discs throughout the game, and you're trying to decipher where exactly, based off of everybody's clue, is this cryptid located. it becomes really tight and really interesting because you're trying to feint with other people as to where something is. So you're trying to give your clues somewhere that they think it looks like. Anyway, it's a blast. I love this game, and I've played it about 4 times, and I've won 3 or 4 times. But the 4th time, or one of the times we played, I screwed it up. I put a clue out there that was inaccurate, and that kind of ruined the whole experience because if you don't do it right, it can only be in one spot. So if you put a false clue down on accident, it makes it unsolvable. So there's that downside to it. But this game is a lot of fun. Cryptid.
Yeah, I'd like to play that one. Is that one where the first time you play it, you're just kind of at a disadvantage, or is it pretty easy to pick up so that you can still be effective in your first game?
The first game definitely is a learning game, but it's not like a heavy learning game. Like you'll take a turn or two before you start really seeing how things start to connect.
Is that enough to put you behind, though? I mean,
no, because everybody starts honing in on one location, and it becomes really obvious where the location everybody is starting to look is throughout the game. But figuring out that exact spot can be tricky, and you're just trying to figure out that spot before anybody else does.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick game, right? Or how long is it?
Yeah, it takes maybe 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how long people are. And, well, for us, maybe it would be an hour being the longest turn podcast, right?
Cool. It sounds like a fun one. I'm interested to play that one.
Yeah, that's Cryptid.
Nice. So I've been playing one of my favorite games of all time, and that is Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan?
Teotihuacan.
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 So this is absolutely one of my favorite games. It was published in 2018. The designer is Daniela Tassini, and it was published by NSKN Games, and I think Board and Dice has kind of at least taken it over. At least all my expansions are by Board and Dice. And I've been playing this recently a ton because I finally got my last expansion, which is poorly named. It's kind of funny. It's named the expansion period expansion.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. So, which
Tyson looks confused. I think his brain just exploded.
I was trying to think, is it a period as in like a period, or is it a period expansion period?
Expansion period written out.
Period of time. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Period of time. Yep. Sorry. Flip the token. Okay. So Teotihuacan, you have this beautiful board in front of you that represents an ancient America city. I believe it's in present day Mexico. So if you haven't played this game, it is a rondel-based action selection game where you are moving your workers around the board, and you get to move one worker per turn, basically. And there's 8 different action locations that you can move to. And at each one of these locations, you can do one of 2 or 3 things. You can collect cocoa, which is how you feed your workers at the end of the rounds. You can do the main action on that board, or there's also a worship action that usually allows you to move up on the tracks. And each action board has different things. There's a few that collect resources. One is stone, one's gold, and one's wood. There is one where you build houses on the Avenue of the Dead. There's one where you're building the temple. There is one where you're upgrading technologies that benefit you throughout the rest of the game. And there's a couple others. One thing that's really cool about your workers that you're moving around is that they're dice. And each time you do a main action with one of those dice, they go up in a pip number. And then as they become higher in value, they become more powerful. And on some of the action boards, you get bigger rewards for the higher the dice value, but also when they're a 5 and they would go up one more time, instead of becoming a 6, they ascend, which means the worker becomes a 1. And however, you get to choose between a bunch of rewards that can be pretty powerful. You also advance on the Avenue of the Dead track, which is worth points at the end of each eclipse or each round. And then the eclipse marker also advances. Each time that happens, it shortens the current round. So in this game, there are 3 rounds, and the end of each round is triggered by the eclipse happening, and victory points are awarded at the end of each round. I love this game because I feel like there are so many different paths to victory, but also you can have some really simple turns, but then you can also have turns where you're triggering multiple rewards and you do 5 or 6 different things. You know, I'm going to build a tile here that lets me go up on the pyramid track, but which gives me a tile reward, which gives me it lets me advance up on a different track. Oh, by the way, I'm also ascending my worker, which lets me go up on a couple more tracks or add another worker, and just lots of different combinations of rewards and your action. There's already been a couple expansions released with new tiles and new modules, and expansion period, I believe, is the last expansion for this game, and it adds another 4 or 5 different modules. And my son and I have been playing this and just having a blast. And in the last game, we played with every single module, which increased the amount of choices of things to do to, just kind of an overwhelming amount. It added major discovery tiles, which were just more powerful than the regular discovery tiles that come in the base game. It adds the mansion, which makes one of the player boards much more interesting and gives you some added bonuses. It also added the altars and shamans tiles, which go in between some of the action boards, which has some extra bonuses, but then also makes those actions that are adjacent to those tiles a little more powerful. Probably my least favorite of all the Teo modules was expanding the Empire. That was module 9, but I've only played with it once, so I'm excited to keep trying it out some more.
Does adding all of the modules and the expansions, how does that affect the length of play in the game?
So I've only played it with all the modules with 2-player, and my son and I can still play the game pretty fast. I don't feel like it was that much slower because, we're both fairly familiar with the game. We might have had to look up a couple tiles that we hadn't seen before, but it was pretty much about the same as we would normally play a 2-player Teo.
Well, I imagine that having played the game, if you're going to put all the modules in, you've probably played the game enough that you're familiar with it. So that sounds like those are good expansions then, because I haven't played with all the modules of like something like Terraforming Mars, or Suburbia, where that like increases the
Anachrony.
length. Yeah,
right.
Exactly, where it increases that length of game by a lot.
And we've been playing this game a ton on BGA. Even the base game is a blast. But if I had to pick which modules I would take out moving forward, I'm not sure I would know which ones I would pick to remove, just because they're all so good. It's a phenomenal game. I love this game.
So with seasoned players, you think include everything?
Yeah,
Don't just fill up the table with all kinds of stuff.
We might need a timer, but yeah, we
right.
And it is.
New longest turn award goes to.
Yeah, well, if you add in all the modules, it is a table hog because you have 2 or 3 extra boards that are off of the side of an already ginormous board. So that's Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan?
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan. So I love that game. Yep, that's what I've been playing.
Cool. I have that expansion. I have opened it, smelled the box, looked through the rules. It looks awesome. It's got obsidian in it, right?
Yeah.
That's one of them.
Yep.
I read the rules to that. I'm like, this seems like something I would always play with.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it just seems
absolutely
awesome.
They're basically, a wild resource.
Right. Which
but they're
is
not
great.
Easy to get, but
yeah. Cool. That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to digging deeper into that one.
I was a little disappointed. I too initially opened up my box and got a good whiff of it and was going through the components and glancing at the rules, and I noticed that my pieces, my red new meeples and stuff that were in the box, they were more of a pink shade and did not match the rest of the red components. So I put in a ticket with Board and Dice, and that's
about as far as it got.
Yeah, so far. Yep. Yeah.
I too, because when you let me know about that, and I went and looked at my copy, and
You have
I
pink
too have
too?
that lovely shade of pink.
Yes.
That is not.
I'm glad it's not
you're
just
happy
me.
about that.
Well, I mean,
it could have just been a production.
I don't want to be
your
temp-
copy.
I don't want to be tempted to like steal it when
right.
or swap them out when I.
Why are you
go to
rummaging
your
through my
house?
games? Cool. Another game I've been playing is, I mean, it could be considered a modern classic at this point. It's really one of the most popular games that have come out.
It's
in the
very
past,
popular.
Past year and a
There's
half.
some misguided people out there.
Misguided people. Here we go. And that's Lost Ruins of Arnak. So I guess the way to describe Lost Ruins of Arnak, it really is you take a bunch of mechanisms and you mash them together into a game, and it works beautifully, right?
Oh, sure.
You have deck building in there. You've got, you're ascending up a track on the right side of the board. It's a worker placement game. I'm sure there's other mechanisms in there I'm forgetting. But the way the game works is you have two workers. The game starts off with, I think it's 5 available worker placement spots where you can get things like tablets, just various different resources. It scales depending on the number of people. You cover up certain spots that you can't go to. So if you're playing with a full complement of players, everything's going to be open. If you're playing with 2 players, you're going to cover up some stuff. So you put your worker down, you get some resources. As the game progresses, additional spots will be discovered that you can go to later on in the game. So if you have a certain number of compasses, you can go explore this map and discover a new place. That new place will be guarded by a guardian.
And random.
It is random. You don't quite know what you're going to get. So there's a little bit of discovery in this game for sure.
Well, if you're an archaeologist, you're discovering things, right?
It's thematic, right?
Sure, very thematic.
And you have a you have a guardian that's protecting this area, and there's certain things that you need to overcome this guardian. So it could be a big spider. There's other things. There's big birds. There's other things.
There's a T-Rex. I just saw a T-Rex the other day.
There's a T-Rex there?
I think so.
That's amazing, right?
So many cards we haven't even seen yet.
Right. But there could be, okay, you got to get rid of these resources. You overcome this guardian. It gives you victory points at the end of the game. There's also a boon associated with that where you get something for defeating that guardian that you can use later in the game. Okay. The fun thing about this game, what I like about this game anyway, is the puzzle of figuring out how to be most efficient, right? The resources are very limited. It's a very tight game. And in order to move up the track, in order to buy a card from the card display, in order to do all of that, it requires timing on how you do it. You can get cards called artifacts that give you certain benefits immediately. And then when you use them later in the game, you have to spend a tablet in order to use them. But that initial time you use it, you get that benefit right away. And then that card goes in your discard pile. So looking at that card row, saying, okay, this is going to immediately get me this, which lets me go up on the track over here, which when you go up the track, you get a benefit. And that benefit's going to give me 2 coins, which lets me buy a tool that goes on the bottom of my deck. And then I can go here and get a card, which is the tool I just got, which gives me another benefit. And wow, it's awesome. I mean,
there's a lot of combo potential in this game.
There's a lot of combo potential in the game, which that puzzle for me is just, it's fascinating to try and figure that out. There's multiple paths to victory, I think. One of the criticisms in the game was that you had to get to the top of that track in order to win. That's a valid strategy, but I've won the game not getting my little hourglass to the top when everybody else did. So, you get points by buying cards, you get points by defeating guardians, you get points by going up the track. There's just a lot of different ways that I think you can win the game, and I'm still exploring it. to find out those ways as well.
I've only played this game on Board Game Arena so far, and I've had a lot of fun with it at first. So I'd heard the critique about get to the top of the track. And so my first game, I remember that's all I was trying to do. And I missed a lot of the nuance of the game. I got to the top of the track first before anybody else, but I totally lost the game. Like I don't think I was anywhere near anybody. As I've played more and more, I've seen that it is important to get the top of the track, or at least find a way that you're going to score points to breach that gap. Because I think if you get to that top of the track, with your hourglass, it's like 23 to 20 points, depending on where you land, right?
Which is a big amount.
The spread is great, but it's not the only way. I do think the game has very limited theme, like integration. Not to say that it needs it, but it's got beautiful artwork, but I find myself ignoring the artwork almost 90% of the time. Like I saw the T-Rex. That was the first time I ever looked at what a Guardian was. I never cared what the Guardians were or anything like that. I have only played it for the mechanics in this game. And that's been fine. I've actually enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned nuances of the game. I mean, for uneducated gamers, seeing those nuances is pretty difficult, right? To really appreciate the game, I mean, you got to see those nuances.
Sorry.
Wouldn't you agree with that, Tyler?
Whatever, Kevin. So I might be in the minority here. I know it's won a number of awards. It's a very popular game. New designers, Min and Elwin, I think. Awesome first game. For me, I'm still trying to decide if this is going to stay in my collection. And I played it a couple times on the table, and then we've been playing it on BGA. And when it comes time for me to take my turn, like I've just on BGA, I've been kind of bored, and I've tried to like it. And I took a break from it where I said, hey, go ahead and play a game without me, right? And I came back to it. I sent you guys an invite to play. I'm trying to like this game. I don't love it. I hope that the expansion that's coming out soon will change a little bit and add a little more to it. I'm actually going to talk about Dune Imperium, so I'm just going to start talking about it right now. These two games are compared so often because they do the exact same things. I mean, deck building,
worker placement.
It's crazy how similar they are.
They came out at the exact same time. Everybody compared them to each other. For me personally, I do like the Dune IP, and I can't wait for the new movie to come out. But for me personally, I would rather play Dune Imperium 9 times out of 10 over Arnak.
I'm not sure where I stand with that yet because I've only played Arnak on BGA. I still need to play it physically, and I've only played Dune once on the table. I loved playing Dune. It took me right out the gate, like the first play, the only play, I really enjoyed that experience, but it did take me some time to warm up to Arnak on BGA. But I don't know if that would have been the same if I had it physically on the table.
And I think I had the opposite experience. I mean, I've played Dune Imperium 2 times, and I was a little lukewarm on both of those plays. It was fun, and I did like the battle mechanic is fun. And there's
and that, I think that's the one big thing that's
major difference
missing from Arnak, right? Is Arnak feels a little more solitaire-ish to me. You can be blocked, obviously, by action selection when people take the spot that you're about to take, but that battle mechanic is not there in Arnak, right? And I think that's one of the things that elevates Dune for me personally.
That Arnak falls on the side of Euro more than Dune does.
Correct.
And Dune falls on the side of Ameritrash more than Arnak.
Yeah.
And historically, my gaming tastes have shifted a little bit. But historically, I've been more of a, dry Euro player, right? And theme hasn't really mattered as much to me. And the Dune theme, I've never read the books. I mean, I'm excited for the movie for sure, but it's not a factor for me at all. So I'm looking at just the gameplay, and I gravitate a little bit more towards the Euros. That's probably part of the reason for me that I like Arnak a little bit better.
There's a couple things, and then I'll be quiet, because I really do like Arnak, and I want to like it more.
Liar.
I want to like it enough to keep it in my collection, right? I don't like getting rid of board games. There's two.
That is painful.
It is, right?
Right.
I mean, there's a couple I'd like to burn, but
you go straight to burn, not just
Goodwill.
at some point, maybe we'll do a top 5 list of, games we were most excited about that we now want to get rid of, or we're most disappointed, right?
Right.
Anyway, 2 things that I love more about Dune Imperium than Arnak. One of them is how the choices that you're presented with using your cards during your turn. Because you can use your cards and whatever their special abilities to place the workers in Dune, or to get some benefit from them, or you can choose to hold on to them, and as part of the end of your round, when you pass, you get the benefits, a different benefit that's on those cards, whether it's swords or weapons towards the battle, or I don't remember off the top of my head what they were, but that choice I feel like was so much more interesting than it is in Arnak. Whereas in Arnak, you get a explorer token or a coin. In Dune, it's like those are heavy choices. You can get huge benefits from playing a card during the round or passing on it and getting the benefit of the card at the end of the round.
I do think that Dune has more of a card-centric feel to it, like more deck building. I think the deck building of Dune felt more interesting to me. I'm not necessarily feeling like in Arnak I'm deck building to deck build. Like I just need a couple cards, and most of the time I'm grabbing the cards for the points they'll score at the end, and hopefully the secondary reason for me in the deck building of Arnak is, well, maybe I can utilize those cards. But I do like in Arnak the choice of where the staff is and choosing the cards. I can't even remember what they're called, but
you go like items and then artifacts.
Yeah, items and artifacts,
yeah.
right? And the difference between them being able to use an ability immediately versus putting that in my deck for later use. And I thought that was interesting. But I think I might agree with you, Tyler, that as far as card play and use of cards, I did like my experience with using the cards in Dune better. But I think that Arnak, once I got past the idea that I'm not really caring about the deck building, it's not the feature of the game. Like the core stuff that I want to be doing is building those combat bows. And if those cards can be utilized to help facilitate more combos, then they're great. But most of the time, I'm actually looking at what can I do on the tracks, and what can I do with my workers on the main guardian space, and then I figure out how do my cards help out with doing those things.
Yeah, one of the things I like about Arnak a little more than Dune is those cards that are available. This staff, like you mentioned, shifts, and more artifacts become available and less items become available as the game goes on. So you have more options of instant actions as the game goes on. And it kind of mixes up that card row. So you're cycling through cards that may get stale and nobody's buying, right? Whereas in Dune, you can get a bunch of cards. Those don't go anywhere. They don't do anything until somebody buys those cards, right? There's no way to cycle through those at all. And I think that's a little bit more interesting in Arnak than it is in Dune.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as the game goes on in Dune, less and less cards are being purchased near the end. But they do get stale every once in a while.
So what I'm hearing is take the card play in Dune.
Well, we just
and
house
take
rule
the buy
it.
row of Arnak and combine those, and then you have the game that you want to play.
You like house rules, Kevin?
Well, my soul dies a little bit every time a house rule is played.
Is even suggested.
It dies a little bit. I mean,
The other thing I like about Dune more than Arnak, there's a couple more things. I could go on for a while.
This could be a feature review, right?
It's close too.
Yeah.
So one of the other things is you know exactly what you're getting when you take an action selection in Dune, whereas you do some of the time in Arnak, and some of the time it's random what your reward is when you flip it over, when you go fight a new beast or guardian, whatever they're called. And it also is random what you're going to have to pay to not take a penalty of a fear card from that guardian. That's one thing I do not like.
But I feel like that's not necessarily like you don't go to the guardian for the random thing. The random thing is the bonus. You go to the guardian space to get whatever it does so that you can chain off of it, and then if you get something that benefits it,
and you get that bonus action to take.
Right. Exactly.
So you get the benefit that's on there, which could be upgrading one of your resources, getting, exiling a card or doing whatever. But then you also get that bonus marker that you can immediately use to get an additional benefit. And then that randomness, I could see how that would be an issue and that could bug some people. But flipping that over and then seeing, okay, this is what I'm faced with. If I want to defeat this guardian now, I got to figure that out. And that's part of the puzzle of the game, right?
But when you're short on resources and it's not the exact resource that you have,
there's been times
it's a little frustrating.
There's been times where I haven't overcome the guardian, but most of the time I'm able to figure out a way. Even if I look at it initially, I'm like, I'm short. But then I start looking more at the board. I can buy this artifact that gives me that, or something.
I almost
There's
always
a way
ignore
to do
it unless I need to. It doesn't bother me. I ignore them and I take the fear cards because I go on the track to find the way to exile or
and then
whatever.
I go the next turn and I defeat your guardian, which
right,
is
exactly,
awesome, right?
And me too. Yeah, and that doesn't bother me because guardians aren't necessarily.
I've started doing the same thing too. I've started just taking the fear cards and saying, "Forget it. This guardian's stupid." And
there's so many ways to thin your deck and to get rid of those.
There is.
Right? There's a lot of ways to do that. Like right now, in the game we're playing, I have 5 cards total, so I know every turn
exactly
what I'm going to draw. Right, I know exactly what I'm going to get. Right.
I feel like you cycle through your cards in Arnak a lot less than you do in Dune. Maybe I'm wrong.
But depends how you pull it because
I'm not sure.
He's going to get 5 cards every turn on the example he just gave.
So I know
he's always going to cycle through his
deck.
deck.
The games are so similar. You could have, when you were explaining Arnak, I could have just inserted Dune and you would have almost.
Right.
I mean,
did the designers consult with each other before? I mean, seriously, it's so weird how the games are so similar.
At least for me, I'm going to say that I fall in the camp that I think I like both of these games, and I couldn't tell you until I've played Dune Imperium more which one I would like best. I think they're both great games based off of my experience.
And I need to play Dune Imperium more. I wish it was on BGA. I think that'd be awesome.
Yep.
Because when games are on BGA, you can really dig into the strategy and stuff. But I would like to play Dune Imperium more, and it could kind of rise up a little bit more for me. But for now, little bit lukewarm.
So I have a couple more things still.
Yeah. One
thing I love about Dune is the 4 separate tracks when you're trying to gain favor with the different factions, whether it's the Bene Gesserits or whatever. I love the Spacing Guild. I love that you get rewards along the way, but that you can also steal. If someone's collected the favor token or whatever it is, you can steal that from someone if they haven't maxed out the track. And that also, if you're ahead on that track, you have to be wary of other people passing you on it to steal the token from you. I think that's
I actually
awesome
don't love that, but I know why you like that. I will always my choice is to opt to not get points that way because I want to find ways to permanently get points instead of have points that are precarious. And taken away from
right, and that's why there's the added bonus or the added incentive to get to the top spot on the track, because then it can't be stolen. But I have a confession to make. I played Lost Ruins of Arnak on Board Game Arena last night with my son, and it was the first time that I can remember where I got a little bit excited about the action chaining that was happening. I've done it, right? I've experienced it before, but for whatever reason, last night I was just kind of on fire, and that got me a little more excited about the game, right?
This is a real breakthrough.
I know, right?
I mean, we're making progress here.
But it's not like I've been trying to dislike this game. I've been trying to like it. I've been trying to find what is special about it. But for the most part, all I see is, hey, this is an exact copy of Dune minus a couple of mechanics.
Yeah, and let's see what the expansion adds, right? Because I mean, I know you're a big fan of variable player powers and starting factions and that kind of stuff. So maybe what that does to the game, kicks it up to a 10, right?
Yeah, well, and see, that comes in the base game of Dune Imperium, which is another leg up for Dune. But no, I did pre-order it. I haven't canceled that pre-order yet, but I am excited to see if that takes it.
And Dune's getting an expansion pretty soon here too.
Right.
It is. Yeah. And I'm also excited for that. So
I think that covers all the game we've been playing lately. I think we've had a long discussion about Dune and Arnak, which we have been playing a lot of those.
We play a ton of games. I mean, this was a very small subsection of that, right?
What I mean by that is that the time we have allotted to discuss games we've been playing have been capitalized by our discussion on Dune and Arnak for good reasons.
It's been a healthy discussion. Yeah. I mean, I feel
that one of us is right and one of us is wrong, which, I mean, we all know it's me that is right.
I'm right down the middle here.
Okay, here. I like Arnak. I like Dune more. If it came, we show up at game night at your house and you're like, all right, did you bring Dune Imperium or we could play Lost Ruins of Arnak? I mean,
you'd be okay with that.
I would run home and get Dune Imperium.
Okay. No, they're both good games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Let's move on to our main review. Kevin's got the rules breakdown for Ankh Gods of Egypt.
In Ankh, players take on the role of one of the gods of ancient Egypt. They will compete against one another for followers. They'll do this by dedicating monuments to their worship, recruiting great monsters from Egyptian lore to show their power, divide the desert with camel caravan trade routes, and fight one another for the love of the people. In the end, only one will remain as the one true god of the land. Ankh Gods of Egypt is an area control game for 2 to 5 players designed by Eric Lang and produced by Cool Mini or Not. It plays in about 90 minutes. Ankh is the third in a trilogy of area control games designed by Eric Lang. The first was Blood Rage, followed by Rising Sun, and finally Ankh Gods of Egypt. The goal of Ankh is to get the most devotion from your loyal followers. You get devotion in a variety of ways, including by winning battles, controlling monuments, controlling desert areas, and dying gloriously in battle. The first person that advances their token to the top of the devotion track immediately wins the game. To start the game, a scenario is set up from the 10 provided scenarios. Based on this scenario, a start player will be determined, and after some additional setup, you're ready to go. Playing Ankh is very simple. You have 1 or 2 actions that you can perform on your turn, with only 4 actions available to choose from. All actions are on a track, and action markers start in a specific location depending on the player count. To take an action, you move the action selection marker on a track 1 space to the right, and then you complete the action you selected. Actions you select can trigger events, which we'll go over in a minute. The main rule for selecting actions is you can only select a second action that is lower than the first action you selected. For example, the gain followers action is lower than the move action, so if you gain followers first, you can't go back and move figures in the same turn. The first action is moving the figures you have on the board. You can move all of your figures up to 3 spaces. There are no movement restrictions. The only rule is that you have to end your movement in an empty, non-water space. The second action is summoning a figure to the board. A figure could be a warrior, your god, or a guardian that you have obtained during the game. Figures must be summoned adjacent to one of your figures already on the board or adjacent to a monument you control. The third action is gain followers. You gain 1 follower for each monument you are adjacent to that you control or that is neutral and not controlled by anyone. The final action you can take is unlocking an Ankh power. Everyone has a god dashboard in front of them that lists their god with their unique god power, and a number of Ankh powers that are the same across all players. There are 6 Ankh tokens that are lined up on your player board that correspond to 3 different levels of Ankh powers. The first 2 unlock Ankh power actions that you take will allow you to unlock 2 level 1 powers. As the game progresses, you will be able to unlock higher and more powerful Ankh powers. Part of the unlock Ankh power action could allow you to control an available guardian. If you uncover a guardian symbol on your god dashboard, you will select a level 1, 2, or 3 guardian depending on the level you unlock. If there are no guardians available, you're just out of luck and will not get a guardian for that action. Guardians will give you special abilities and are summoned like any other figures. If you move the action marker to the last space on the action track, you will trigger an event. Events will allow you to gain control of monuments, divide regions on the board with camel caravans, and trigger conflicts. Control of monuments can give you devotion. Camel caravans will split regions to create more conflicts and reorder the conflict resolution. And the conflict event will allow you to battle other players in your region for the devotion of your followers. The conflict event is the main event that I want to go over. It's really where the meat of the game is. Each region will have a number, and you will resolve each region in numerical order from lowest to highest. If you are the only person in that region, you will dominate the region and will get a certain amount of devotion for doing so. If there is more than one person in the region, a conflict will occur. To resolve a conflict, players will secretly select one of 7 battle cards from their hand. Cards are then revealed and the conflict is resolved. First, any monuments are built if applicable. Plague cards are then resolved, which could wipe out entire armies. Monument majority is then determined and devotion awarded, and then the battle is resolved. Whoever has the most power at the end of battle resolution wins the battle and is awarded devotion for the win. All of the figures are removed from the region and back to the player's reserve areas. Power for most figures is 1. This can be augmented by certain game effects or guardian or god powers. Battle cards can also add additional power. It's also important to note that gods cannot be killed. This has important implications during the game that players can use to their advantage. After all battles are resolved, play continues with players selecting actions and resolving events. At the end of the 3rd conflict event, the 2 lowest gods in devotion will merge. The lowest god in devotion will merge with the higher god. This means that all monuments of a lower god are removed from the game, as well as warriors, battle cards, and their pool of Ankh tokens. All followers from the lower god will be given to the higher god. The devotion marker will also be moved to the lower god's position on the devotion track. All Ankh powers are set to match the higher god's revealed powers. Any guardians obtained by the lower god are joined with the higher god, and for the rest of the game, the 2 gods are merged and both god abilities can be used by both players. Only one action can be performed by each of the merged players on their turn. The last thing to mention in Ankh is the Forgotten Gods. The devotion track is split into 2 colors, red and blue. If at the end of the 4th conflict you have not moved out of the red section of the track, you will be removed from the game and will be a Forgotten God. If all players are in the red, nobody wins. If only one player gets out of the red, that player will win. Otherwise, the game will continue until somebody gets to the top of the devotion track. So that's the basics of Ankh. Let's get back to the group and see what we thought of Ankh Gods of Egypt.
All right, thank you, Kevin, for the rules overview of Ankh Gods of Egypt, the game that we're reviewing today. To start, let's talk a little bit about the production quality of Ankh. I want to hear from Kevin first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much wrong with it at all. I did get the Kickstarter all-in pledge. So it has all the upgraded bits, everything, except for one thing in the expansion, which we can talk about a little bit later. It's all upgraded. The minis are just incredible. One of the things I really like about it is the different gods are all different colors, plastic. Not everything's just gray. You have the guardians that are all gray, but they're not specific to any god, so that makes sense. The sculpts are fantastic. There's one of the sculpts that he's got a mummy in his arm. It's just this crazy detail and cool sculpts, I think, are really
Even
great.
the little one, the cat mummy. Remember we were just playing with that?
Oh, yeah, the cat mummy. It's fantastic. I do have the neoprene playmat, which is the colors are vibrant. Everything looks great. That's awesome. But even if you don't have that, the board is really detailed and everything looks great when it's all laid out. The table presence is just fantastic. So I don't really think I have anything bad to say about the production at all.
The only thing I would say, I do have something that I would complain about a little bit in the production quality. but that's not with my copy. So I actually sold my copy of this game, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But
I'm still waiting for my copy. I've got a nice playmat, but I'm still waiting for my copy.
I mean,
it's been a couple months now, but
I've had mine for like, 2.5 months, something like that.
the point is, we all have the Kickstarter version of this game.
Right.
If I went in to a retailer to buy this, like I bought Blood Rage, because I didn't get Blood Rage from Kickstarter. I got that from a retail copy. If I got this from retail and I had to use those monument tokens that were like the cardboard pyramids that are just black, white, and orangish, yellowish color on it, that would be such a dissatisfying experience. For me, part of the experience of this game is to have all of that stuff, because it really makes it easier to see on the board. Like if it were just those tokens, it would be hard to differentiate, I think, between is that a pyramid or is that an obelisk? And like things like that. Just, I think there could be some issues if I just got this at retail. But as is with the Kickstarter version, I have almost no complaints with the production.
Yeah, I think it does add to it, the Divine Offerings, which gives you those tokens. It gives you the recessed player boards where you drop those tokens in there. So they're not going to get bumped around.
But I'm not even just talking about the Divine Offerings. I'm talking about the stretch goal
Tomb of Wonders
box.
stuff,
The Tomb of Wonders box does not come standard at retail.
No, it doesn't.
If you just bought the Ankh Gods of Egypt box, that is that basic box, the green box with who's on there? Anubis? Is that? I can't remember. One of the gods on the front cover. And I pulled that out and I opened it and I didn't have those monuments, those 3D mold monuments, and I only had the tokens. I think I'd be a little disappointed by those.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with that, because the table presence is just crazy with all that plastic on the board. I think you'll still enjoy the game.
Absolutely.
And I think the game stands up, without all of that stuff, but it does increase my enjoyment having all of that.
Well,
so I have no regrets going all in. I mean, my wife has regrets for me going all in, but I have no regrets going all in, getting all of that stuff.
This is the cotton candy game, right?
This is the cotton. So yeah, funny story. I told my wife I was backing Ankh and that it was going to be roughly $100. And anybody who backs big games on Kickstarter knows it's never $100. So the bill, that funded, and it ended up being what, $250 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, and
with the mat and all in.
Yeah, with the mat and all in, and we got a cotton candy machine out of that whole deal. My wife wanted one of those, so really, it's a win-win for everybody, right?
So it was more like a $500
right?
game.
It was more money. No, it was more than a $500 game, but
So Tyler, do you have any thoughts on the production of this game?
Well, as I've said, I don't have my own copy yet, but I did do the same pledge that Kevin did, and the table presence of this game, of the all-in, Kickstarter version, is just amazing. It's off the charts. It's beautiful. The level of detail on the miniatures is just incredible. Kevin talked about how each god's miniatures are different colors, and I love that it's easy to identify. If they were all the same color and you're playing this game and you look at the map, it would be hard to pick out your characters. So I love that they're different colors. I don't have any complaints with it, but again, when I get my copy eventually, and hopefully it's not in French, I'm going to open that bad boy up and I'm going to check it out, because I'm excited to get my own copy.
Yeah, I think overall production quality is great. The biggest complaint I have, regardless of whether or not this is the retail version or the full Kickstarter versions of this, whichever tier you get, I think the biggest complaint for me, like any of the other games in this trilogy, is storage solution. If you want to add stuff to this game, if you want to play with the different styles of gods and the different miniatures and the different expansions and whatever, and you have all the stuff, hauling that around it's
a disaster. I can't stand it. I have a game bag that's a pretty big game bag, and I can't fit everything in that game bag if I'm hauling it to somebody else's house. I mean, obviously the playmat's not going to fit in there, but even if it's not the playmat, I have one extra box that's sitting on top of my bag. So, I mean, it's a big game. One other thing is you were talking about, it is a table hog, right? It takes
Right.
up a lot of room. So if you have a smaller game table, you're going to have some issues getting this on here, especially if you're playing with the full player count
Anything
of 5.
extra, yeah.
I have a game table that it's a pretty good sized game table, and this game won't fit in the vault of that game table. I got to put the top on. Not a big deal, but it does take up a lot of space. Is another thing.
Absolutely. And I had this experience with Blood Rage. Those plastic trays where all the minis are stored, pulling those out of the giant box is just so annoying for me. And they're super flimsy trays
Right.
and after any extensive amount of play with this, those are going to start falling apart. And it's figuring out where each miniature goes because it's not clearly labeled. It's a production to put it on the table and take it off the table.
I'm to the point now where I'm like, I think I'm just going to get rid of all those flimsy plastic trays and dump everything in the box, right? Consolidate everything down to 2 boxes. I know, this is crazy.
I got
right?
a fish and tackle box that is slotted that you can have because I'm
Maybe
worried about
that's
your minis.
I know, but I'm almost to that point because it is. I like when we play the game. I like to get all the guardians available to play. Pick everything randomly, so I could be picking stuff from the expansion box, right? From the Guardians expansion, from the Tomb of Wonders, from the base game. So,
But that's no surprise.
You're opening up everything.
Come on, Simon, whatever you call it, right? Cool
No,
mini or not.
no,
That's
not at all.
That's to be expected. You go into this game understanding that. The big problem for me again is just that the quality of those trays and moving in and out is just going to be problematic.
And it really is at the end of the day a small gripe. Oh no,
Right.
I have too
Right.
much stuff. Right? It's a small gripe.
Were you also going to talk about a token that you didn't like? Or
Oh, geez. Yeah. So the expansion,
Pharaohs, right?
Pharaoh's expansion, which didn't go over that in the rules explanation, but spoiler alert, it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
There are tokens in the Pharaoh's expansion, and they're the only tokens in the whole game that are not upgraded, which
If you have the
kind of
Kickstarter version.
my OCD is on high alert. Seeing that, it's like it's out on the board, it's out on the track, and
It's the only cardboard there.
and it's the only cardboard there. Why would you do that? I would spend $5 extra in the Kickstarter. What's $255 as opposed to $250?
I can guarantee you it doesn't cost $5 per thing.
All right, so that knocks the production value down just a touch.
Ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly.
I think that covers production for us. And overall, we're all pretty impressed with the production of this game. Let's talk a little bit about gameplay. What do we like about Ankh? Tyler, can you start us off with some of the thoughts you have about Ankh?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the action selection tracks. When you get to the point, you have the 4 basic actions that you're choosing from, and you can do 1 or 2 depending on whether or not you kick off an event. You are choosing between which actions most benefit you, and also what you have to consider is how well you're setting up who's next to you and who's after them. And that the action selection for that purpose, I absolutely love those decisions right off the bat. That's the first thing that I think about and I love about this game.
I think the first game we played,
I was going to bring that up.
Kevin was sitting right to my right, and so I got to go after Kevin. And there were multiple turns where he set me up to be able to use the event and take an action that was like, well, I can't not take that. And so I love that because it really makes the experience different every time, because it's not like in a lot of games I will go ahead and have my turn planned out for the next turn if possible. But I love where games make it so that I can have that plan, and then if there's an opportunity that arises, I can go ahead and switch that plan and take the more advantageous thing. And this game does that in spades for me, because there were a number of times in that first game particularly where Kevin would absolutely pick something and I was like, well, I had no idea that I was going to be doing that action, but now there's no way I'm not doing that action.
I hate when you sit next to me, by the way. Intern order.
I feel that, about both of you. So,
Yeah, right.
especially when Tyson's talking to me, talking in my ear.
He's trying to mess you up. Yeah.
No, the action selection is just awesome. I love that.
One of the things I love about the game is the battle, is the conflict and the conflict resolution, and specifically the card play in the battles and how interesting that is. Like I've played 4 times now. The last time we played, trying to determine what the other person is playing, trying to get in their head about what card they're going to play and counter that with the cards that you play. It's fascinating, right? So if you think that they're going to play the plague card, wipe out your entire army, then you can play the miracle card. You're going to get devotion for all of your warriors, all of your figures on the board that get removed, right?
Which is traditional Eric Lang in the sense that it's the Loki strategy of this game, which is not as prominent, but I love that you can see the ties between his games by doing stuff like that.
Exactly, but there's different decisions that you can make, right? Like, are you going to do the desert card or whatever that one's called? Try to load up all of your figures onto the desert to get devotion that way, you know, and just that whole dynamic. Are you going to take all your cards back? The fact that you play a card and you can't use it again until you play the card that gets all the cards back into your hand, kind of the Concordia type mechanism, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's that's interesting too. There's a number of times where we're playing the game where I didn't do that at the right time, and it completely hose me for the next conflict, right? Because I didn't have those cards in my hand. So all those interesting decisions to make playing those battle cards I love that part of the game.
Well, and you bring that up, and I was going to save this for a little bit later, but I think that is such an interesting part of the game, in that if you do not play that card at the right moment, or you play it prematurely, it can have an impact that changes the outcome of that entire conflict event. And each of those conflict events have multiple battles that occur in them. And if you don't do it at the right time, then it has problems. The most recent game that we played, it was a 3-player game, and I played a card, and I can't even remember what card it was at this point, but the moment I played it and revealed it, I was like, that was the wrong card to play. And that's put me at the bottom of the totem pole for the rest of this game. And I knew by that card that I played that I was going to merge, that I was going to be the one on the bottom of this stack that is going to do that. So the thing I want to bring up is the merge mechanic. And I know that this mechanic has a lot of conversation around it, and there's a lot of controversy on it, but I'm going to put it in this section of what do I like about this game, and I like the merge mechanic. Now, I'll preface it by saying I was a little bit trepidatious at first of this mechanic, and I was cautious, but I also figured it was designed in the game for a reason, and if I could figure out what that reason was, maybe I could learn to appreciate it. The first game that we played, I had no problem not being merged, but it was a 5-player game that we played, and I was doing everything I could. That merge mechanic, knowing that it was there and that it would come, made me think I've got to do everything I can early on to not merge, because that sounds terrible. It sounds like my game is going to get taken away from me. But this last game that we played, I got to merge, and it was the most satisfying experience with this game I think I've had to this point.
It was one of the most satisfying and cool game experiences I've had all year,
right?
Really, if not longer than that, right?
Absolutely.
It was so unique, and it was exciting, and it was fun, and it was just awesome.
Well, yeah, you and I merged. Kevin and I merged,
right.
And we, which was kind of unpredictable, because at first I was thinking I was going to be merging with Tyler, and that we would be sitting there, and I was gaming that, and I realized that we gave up some points because we thought that it was going to be you and I merging. But I love that you can prepare for that mechanic. That's one of the things that I thought was really great.
I love when the merge is about to happen and you look at where everybody is on the devotion track. When you're faced with the decision of merging, like you're on the verge of either moving up far enough that you don't have to merge, or you can become part of the merge. And you try to decide, okay, looking at who I would merge with, player board, and my board, do I have a bigger chance of winning if I merge or if I don't merge, right?
So you're looking at like the god powers.
Yep.
Can be a huge deal.
Yes.
If you have, if you merge with somebody and you have a good synergy with those god powers,
Yep.
it can be a big deal towards getting devotion and ultimately winning.
But I think it's amazing that the game presents you with that choice of, if I do worse right now, it'll benefit me later.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Any game that presents you with a choice to do worse now even for a moment or for one turn or for one action, so that I can have a better chance of winning later, I think that's an incredible choice, right?
Right.
And a really cool thing. I mean, we played the other night with my son. Kevin and I played with my son, and it came to the point where the merge was about to happen. It was the last battle, and I was like, hey, Kevin, if you let me win this battle or let me get devotion a certain way, we'll be closer to each other when we merge, and you won't have to go further back on the track. And Kevin's response was what?
Well, like an idiot, I said, well, I could actually be in first place and not have to merge.
Right?
Yeah.
And so Kevin chose to play the card. And like I said, I don't remember what the specifics were, but he played the card that gave him the most devotion, that took him out of the 2 merge spots. Yeah. And then my son and I merged, and we ended up winning the game.
He proceeded to destroy me. Right? Well, yeah, I think it came down to maybe 2 or 3 devotion at that point at the end. But yeah, it was. But it was an interesting decision, right?
Right. It was awesome, right?
It was cool.
I think that's one of those mechanics that you have to almost see it play out once to really see the value in it, right? I mean, I know the first game that we played with our group, it didn't go over well with, at least initially, the 2 people that merged.
Yeah, Dan hated it, and I think it made him never want to play the game again, right?
Right. And I think Ben, by the end of the game, I think he appreciated it and enjoyed the mechanic. So I think the first time a group plays it or the first time a player plays it, I think that they're going to have a negative reaction to it, right? I think you have to see that play out and see how powerful and fun it can be if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit.
No, that makes perfect sense to me, because that was exactly what so when I was merging, I realized I'm going to merge. I need to do everything I can in this last conflict event to get some followers. But also, I need to do everything I can to get devotion, because if I don't have enough devotion, my problem is that I'm going to severely hinder myself, and in this situation, Kevin, from having a chance at winning the game. I think the problem for a lot of people, myself included, the first time I was introduced to this mechanic, was I had a set of expectations of what that mechanic was and how it was supposed to work. So I think the big issue is having a set of expectations of what that mechanic is going to be. So for example, I think that a lot of people go into games thinking, oh, this is a competitive game or this is a cooperative game, and that's what it is. We have some games that will do stuff like Betrayal at House on the Hill, where you will switch sides, or maybe like a 1 versus many game where you have some people working cooperatively and one person and then competitively against others. So you have those expectations. I don't know of many other games that do this kind of mechanic. I don't think there's, that I can think of, a game that really makes this merge type of thing where you become somebody and your stuff helps benefit somebody else in the way that Ankh does it here. And so I think having those expectations, you mentioned some of the other people we play with, Dan and Ben, having had expectations of what was going on, and being upset when that merge initially occurred. And I think that once Ben started figuring out, oh, there's stuff I can do here that I couldn't have done on my own that was really valuable, it became different. For me, when I merged with Kevin, I realized I can be as involved or not involved as I want to be in this experience. And I mean, fortunately, Kevin is not somebody I'd consider to be an alpha gamer. And so he didn't just be like, no, this is definitively what we're doing. Because in the rules specifically, it says if there's a disagreement, the person who was on top is going to be the one who gets all the decisions. But if you treat it as really, how do we benefit this situation together? I think it ends up working out really well. And I loved being able to take our cards and like I curated my deck to look exactly like your deck and then
show each other the cards. Is this, I think he's going to play this card.
Right.
You know, what do you think? And then we're not talking where he could hear it. Right.
Which is part of the exciting part for me because you can have those conversations as much or little as you want. And it was really fun to think about, what can I say before we put our cards down? And what can I say once his cards are down? Like, I think that made it really fun.
That was interesting. Like when he would play his card, then all of a sudden we were like, he's playing this card, you know, or, you know, this is what I think is going to happen. We didn't want to give away anything beforehand.
Yeah.
But then after he played his card, we knew he played his card, then we could start talking about it. And it was just really fun, that aspect of it.
Well,
one thing that I think is, I could see people having a negative reaction to as part of the merge is that if you're the lower god, you are losing some of the things that you've worked for throughout the game, right? All of your monuments go away. All of the Ankh powers that you've tried to tailor your game towards are now merged with the higher god, right? So that can kind of feel bad a little bit, right? I think that could be, I'm jumping ahead a little bit to maybe the negatives here, but that can not be a great experience, especially the first time you play the game. Right?
I think it's okay to talk about. I mean, we're focusing on the merge right now. So, and also along with that, if you're the second to lowest player and the lowest player is 8 points behind you and you know, or 8 devotion behind you and you have to drop down that far, that can be demoralizing too. And I think that did happen in that initial play.
Why didn't you play better?
Going back to what you guys were talking about just a second ago with trying to figure out, you know, what card I was going to play and what, you know, communicating about which card you guys were going to play. I think you also had the added bonus of, I mean, it was exciting because you had the god that if you predicted what card I was playing, it would,
gain a follower that could count for
devotion. So there was scales, and for every battle, this god's ability was you can try and guess a card that a person was playing. So, and when I first read that ability, I'm like, I'm not too excited to play this guy at all. But it ended up being a really cool experience.
And I think it added to the excitement of you guys trying to figure out what card I was playing and trying to decide what card you were going to play.
Ultimately, it didn't make a point difference for us, but the experience, absolutely what you're saying.
Earlier in the game, before merging, I was able to successfully guess a few cards, and it did give me devotion. But when we merged, we didn't see any benefit of that. But it didn't take away any excitement of actually, we were right, you know? Yeah, he is playing Cycle of Mott. Sweet, you know, and that was fun.
Well, I think the highlight of that experience for me was, so we could bluff. That was one of the things. I love the ability to be able to lie and manipulate and do stuff like that. And so I really liked that having the conversation merging allowed me to bluff way better than it could on a one-on-one experience. So like I could be saying things to you and not truly meaning them. And we had to find signals to be able to.
And then I'm picking up on that. Yeah. It's like, this is the plague, right? We're going to sacrifice 15 followers, right?
Right.
Wink, wink. Right. And then you reveal, and then there's like nothing, you know.
I think there were some that were pretty overt.
Some of them you knew about.
Some was like, okay. It's obvious what they're doing a little bit.
But we felt cool doing it. So that's all that matters, right?
But especially when it comes, I mean, this happens in the early battles and conflicts, but especially, you know, when you guys are discussing things and what's real and what's not real, right? What are they saying for me to hear? What are they saying to actually decide what they want to play? I mean, we joked about this the other night. especially when you're trying to figure out what card you're playing or what everybody else is playing. It's the ultimate. Clearly, I cannot choose the wine in front of me, right? I mean, it's that experience times 1,000. Like going back and forth. Okay, if I play this card, they could counter it. And do I really want to win this battle, right? If I don't want to win, what am I trying to get out of it? What's the max I can get devotion-wise? Do I play the Plague of Locusts and try and wipe out their guys so next conflict there's nobody there to fight or they have to redeploy, right? So I don't know.
No, there's definitely a press your luck element to the game, right? Yep. And when you guess right, it's really satisfying.
Yeah. Well, and it's a chess match in some ways too, right? There's that if you do this, here are my options of what I can do. But if you don't do that, here are my other options. And that's really cool. And in fact, I think in our last game, Tyler played that particularly well in a couple of instances where I didn't even see it. He had set himself up and I didn't understand what he was doing. He had moved his guys close to a pyramid, which I had played. We were playing with the Pharaoh expansion, so this has some different things. We had Ramses as the Pharaoh, and Ramsey had an ability at that point in time that took away all of the points or the value added in a conflict of any warriors next to a monument. And Tyler had moved a couple of his guys next to a monument. I was like, why on earth would you do that? You've just negated the total value of what you're doing in this conflict. So why would he do that? What is he going to do? And I didn't figure it out until it was too late. And he had strategically positioned it to move certain tokens in a way that I hadn't predicted or seen so that I could not get close enough to utilize another special effect that would have just kind of depleted everything for him.
And also to steal the monuments from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That game the other night was a blast. I mean, and
it was so much fun.
People went home at 2 a.m. Right?
Right. We did not play particularly fast.
There's a reason why we're called the Longest Turn Podcast.
Right.
That game was one of the examples of that.
But even though it was like a 3-hour game, or I don't know how long that gameplay was in particular, it did not feel that long. Right?
No.
Every time we have played, and it's taken a while because we're fairly slow players at times, but it hasn't felt long. It's been exciting. I've been engaged the whole time. There's been interesting things to do, and it's just been a great experience.
So what are some of the things that may not be as interesting? So what are some of the things that we don't necessarily like about this game? What are the buyer beware types of things?
So I'll say one thing that I've since changed my mind on that I initially thought was kind of useless and ridiculous. And then after a second play, it became clear to me why this is so important. And that's the camel deployment. I don't know if that's what you were thinking.
It was one of them, but it wasn't the one I thought.
In the first game, you do the action selection, you trigger, is it an event?
So it is an event. It's a camel event.
Okay, so you take your action selection and you trigger an event and you get stuck with one of the camel ones. And I remember thinking that happened to me once or twice in the first game we played. And I was like, this is so lame. Everybody else is claiming neutral monuments or stealing monuments from people, and I'm putting out camels, right? And that first game, I didn't realize it until the second game when it came down to the order of battles that were taking place that determined the winner, right? And I realized, wow, putting out the camels is huge. When you can determine which battles happen first and you can select, hey, I'm more prevalent in these regions, I'm going to move these order tokens into those regions. When you deploy the camels, you have the ability to do that. And that could determine whether I win or not by 1 or 2 devotion, right?
So, I mean, I guess that's something to be aware of, right? It's not necessarily a negative.
It's not a negative.
But initially when you play it, it could appear that way.
But I think it does contribute to a potential negative that I had to work around. And a lot of the negatives I have are more of you got to understand that that's the way the game works. And once you understand that, it's not a negative. But similarly, so take the camels. When you do that and you make those changes to be able to take the area numbering, the event token, and switch it into another region that is more beneficial to you, that can be a really big deal, because ultimately this game is a race, right? It's a race to the finish, because the game ends once somebody hits the highest devotion thing. Immediately, right? And so that is
foreshadowing of a negative.
That is potentially a negative in the fact that there's no way to work around that. As soon as somebody hits that, even if you were about to score all the points, you don't finish out that round. You don't complete everything. You end the game immediately. So by switching the camels and making it that event switches in turn order, it can make the game, right? It can determine who wins that game because of that.
And I think we saw that in the second game we played. Right, it completely switched the end game because of that event, and none of us really realized that. It was one of those, which is kind of cool about this game, or any game you play. It's like that aha moment of, whoa, okay, I see why that's was a design decision in this game, and I see why that's so important.
Well, and it's awesome anytime after multiple plays of a game, you're still discovering new things, and that's one of the things I loved about playing Ankh.
I'll tell you another
Before we move on from camels.
I said no camels! That's 5 camels!
Sorry. A good little Indiana Jones in there.
I would have been disappointed if you didn't bring that up.
No, that's good to inject in here. Along those lines, though, I feel like for me, that discovery element can have a negative side of it. So what I mean by that is that in our second game, I used the Obelisk Attuned ability, right? And the Obelisk Attuned ability, essentially what it does is it allows you to take units that you have in one region, and if you have a monument in another region, you can basically teleport them there before a battle occurs. Well, I had used that very effectively in the first game that we played to win, and I really loved that. But then I unlocked that ability in the second game, and then I attempted to use it, and Kevin rightfully pointed out that the way that I was using it was not quite accurate, and it wasn't clear to me why that was, but it all came down to one word on the player board that says your. So like it says something to the effect of move all of your units in the battle that you or wherever all your units are. So something to that effect.
It's the battle that you're currently in. So you had to be in a battle, and then you could use Obelisk Attune to move additional people to that obelisk in the battle you're currently in. So I think the way you were playing it before is that you could just
swap to any region.
So if you weren't currently in a battle, you could take a figure and move it into that battle. But that was a misunderstanding.
Which was a wrong interpretation, and I totally agree that I shouldn't have been playing it that way. But my complaint, the negative side of this, is that there is a amount of rules lawyering in this game that has to be done. Yeah. There has never been a game that we've played, at least that I've participated in, that we haven't had to reference the rule book and say, wait, have we been playing this right? And then we've had to make little small adjustments, or we've never played a game perfectly to this point.
Yeah, there's edge cases that come up in every game where you're like, okay, if I have a specific guardian in here that has an ability, what's the order of resolution, right?
Right.
Like, which makes a big difference towards the end of the game. Like, am I going to get devotion now for this thing, or if I'm going to
when does the cat mummy cause these people who are not the owner of the cat mummy to lose devotion, right? Especially if that happens at the end of the game when you're one step away. Did they get their devotion for winning the battle first, or do they lose their devotion for not having the mummy?
And with the amount of discovery that goes into this game, especially if you have that full Kickstarter version with everything in it, you pull in anything new, you're more than likely going to experience another situation like that. And so for me, the negative is that if you're not okay with a game that you have to make split decisions on what does this rule actually mean, you may come up with a number of situations where you're going to encounter that type of a experience. It can ruin the game. I think that's, for the people we've played with who don't like the game so much, it has usually resulted in an experience like that where I think Mark had a similar experience and Dan had that experience where something they didn't fully understand, but something that the experienced players at the table had understood was not made absolutely clear because it's nuanced and because it's not immediately apparent.
I think it was also frustrating. Was it the second game that we played at Ben's? It came down to a final decision, and for the two of us that were in it,
Yeah, Tyler and I were in it.
yeah, I contributed to the longest turn of the night in that game for sure. But Mark and Ben, and I don't know if you were really in it.
I was in
Tyson,
third, but I was a distant third.
But Mark and
It
Ben
was
were out of the
basically
game
between me and Tyler. Yeah.
and we were sitting there talking about what we could play, and if I played this, and going back and forth for a couple dozen minutes at least. And
A couple of it was pushing a half hour probably.
Well,
that last turn was
that
the
last
longest
turn,
turn of the night.
it was brutal.
It was
right?
brutal.
And
And I can only
it had to
imagine-
have been brutal for
Yes.
the players who were not
Completely
involved
out
in
of the
it.
game.
They could have made a
Right.
sandwich. They could have gone shopping.
And-
a number of things, right?
But it did pay off because
For you, it paid off.
I didn't figure out the one way that I could win, and it was also one of those finicky word things that I don't.
when devotion is awarded or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that-
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
With one of the Ankh powers.
yes,
Yeah.
and I ended up winning, but that
But
was
it felt kind of weird, right?
It did, and
it wasn't a satisfying victory at that point.
it wasn't, and
It was almost
it
like
felt
you won
tainted.
it's almost like you won on a technicality.
But I love that about this game. I don't feel like I have to win to have a good time. I feel like the whole experience of gaining devotion, deploying your warriors and fighting the battles and doing the action selection. I mean, the whole game is an experience and it's fun, and I don't have to win to enjoy the play, right?
Right.
So I do have another negative of the game around it's not a big negative, but around the Guardians and how you get the Guardians, right? So the way it works is if you take an Ankh action, you remove that little token, you get that ability, and if you uncover one of the Guardian symbols, you get that Guardian. So if you're later in turn order, let's say you're either third, fourth, or fifth, then you can get shut out for the entire game if everybody's always taking those Ankh actions from getting a Guardian. And it's happened a few times in the games that we played.
Especially in a 5-player game.
Especially in
I
a
was going to say more
five-player.
prevalent in a higher player
But
count.
you also scale down the number of Guardians that are in a game based on the player count. So it still could happen at lower player counts. So as I've played the game more, I've realized it's not necessarily the most important thing to get the Guardians. You don't have to get those to win. But I want the Guardians, right? Because they're cool, right? And they do special abilities, and they're miniatures, and you snap your base onto them, and you can place them on the board, just
and they
like
add
any
an
other
ability
figure.
that is unique to them that allows you to do something, break a rule essentially in a way that other people can't do.
Right.
Like think about the first when I had the scorpion. No, I had the rabbits. I can't even remember what they're called, but like I had a rabbit in the first game. You had the scorpion, and you had pushed it to try and destroy one of my monuments. And the cool part about it was I was able to find a way to use and break that Guardian ability to push it back. But there was nothing you could do about it at that point because you didn't have that Guardian to be able to rectify that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the problem I have with that is that there's really nothing you can do to mitigate not getting a Guardian if everybody else is taking those Ankh actions. So you're kind of shut out at that point, which is problematic. There are different scenarios, and we haven't talked about the scenarios at all, but there are scenarios that I think address that. There's one scenario that there's a Guardian auction, and we haven't played that one yet. And I'm interested to play that to see how that changes it, right? Because then, you're not necessarily shut out of that.
But I think you're right. It's player count is where some of that will come into play because I think in a 3-player game, even if I don't get the Guardian, I can also plan for the merge because there's only 3 of us, and then I can get effectively have use of the Guardian later if I choose to be in the merge option. And I think there is choice there on where you want to be for that. And there's some interesting choices. But yeah, I can understand that complaint.
So I have a negative, and it's how the game ends. And I've come to like it a little more, but it's still a negative for me. I do not love that it's whoever gets to the last devotion spot or the top devotion spot who wins, and the game's over, right? And that could happen during conflict, during a conflict in battle 1, or it could happen in battle 5 or battle 6. And I get you're trying to position yourself and set yourself up so that you can have earlier opportunities to get to the highest spot. But there's so many, I feel, finicky things about when is devotion awarded for different things, when is it taken away in some cases, that it really, I've come to terms with it. I'm okay with it. I'll play and I'll have fun, and regardless of how it comes out, I enjoy the game, but it still bugs me a little bit that it's a race to that last spot. Because you can have, I almost, and I've, thrown this out there, like, what if we played it like viticulture, where the end game is triggered, but we still finish out the rest of the round. Well,
The rest of the conflict.
Right, the rest of the conflict, and fight out all the battles.
House rule.
Because it does. And I don't want to implement it because I've come to terms with it. But it's still a little bit of a negative to me. It's the race to the top when it's can become so finicky at the end.
Like very fiddly, right? It's like you're paying super close attention to the order that everything is happening because, last in devotion order gets this, and then all of a sudden then I'm on top, I'm not last, and then this person gets this, and it's just really kind of fiddly at the end there.
And it contributes to the analysis paralysis at the end, right?
Yep, for sure.
Okay, if I do this, I get 2 devotion, but I need 3, and if Kevin or Tyson, gets 1, they win. So how do I beat? It really makes those last few battles take forever to pick the card.
But I can't imagine that Eric Lang, being at the caliber of designer he is, didn't test that. Blood Rage, you play through the end of the round. There's nothing like that.
It's a design decision.
Rising Sun is similar, I believe.
But it also makes, again, going back to the camels, it makes the camels and being able to switch the order of how the regions are resolved very powerful.
So I think we've gone over a lot of the things that we do like and the things we don't like. Let's go to our final thoughts of this game. And with our final thoughts, we'll also give a rating from 1 to 5. And if you truly hate this game, you can go and break our scale and put a 0 on this game. But so let's start with Tyler. Tyler, what are your final thoughts for this game?
I love this game. I would play this game any day of the week, assuming I had 3 to 5 hours, depending on who's playing, and whether or not we implement some kind of timer rule for battle card decisions. But no, I love this game. I would happily play this game. I think the replayability is off the charts because of the scenarios, because of the different Guardians, and just playing when we played the Pharaoh expansion the other night, I never want to not play with the Pharaoh expansion unless we're playing with new players. But I love this game. The production quality is amazing. It's a beautiful game. When I get my copy, I will be playing this a lot with my son, and I know he's excited to play it. And for my rating, I went back and forth a little bit between a 4 and a 5, but I have to give it a 5 because even with some of the negatives, I would the whole experience is what I care about, and I have had a blast every game I've played, and I think there's plenty more opportunity to still discover new things within the game and to have a good time. So it's a 5 for me.
Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I feel similar. I love the game. The first few times I played, the game kind of ended and I didn't quite know how I felt about it, right? But the third and fourth times, when I understood the cards more, I understood the mechanics, how things worked, then it was just an amazing experience both of those times. The game, every time I play, the game feels epic. It feels huge. It feels big. I mean, the table presence is just incredible. So you look at it and you're like, whoa, I want to play this game, right? It just looks awesome. The variable god powers I love that. I love how your god is unique, and it feels unique. Every god you play is different. Like Tyler mentioned, the variability, throwing in different guardians, throwing in different scenarios, all of that stuff just changes up the feel of the game. And every time you play it, it's different. So yeah, like Tyler mentioned, replayability is off the charts. Action selection that we've mentioned is great. So there's a lot to like about this game. There's a few things that we've talked about that I'm not, real big on, but I don't think that really takes it down much at all. I think the experience overall is fantastic. So I like it. As far as final rating goes, it's a 5. It's a solid 5.
Oh yeah.
So we've got
I'd play it at any time.
So we got 2 5s right now, and the real question is, what am I going to put it at, I guess, and see whether or not I keep the trend. Well, I'm not going to bury the lead. Yeah, I'll give it a 5 as well. I think there's no secret. We chose this as the first game of the podcast because this is a game that we think has a lot to offer, and there's a lot of really good things, and we wanted to give our thoughts that we have thoughts about. I'm in agreement with both of you and a lot of what you said. Obviously, we recognize that there are some warts, but for me, this game is a 5. For my style of game, for what I'm looking for in a game, it's a 5. I recognize, however, that the game is not going to be a 5 for everybody, particularly if you have concerns about that merge mechanic or you have concerns about that race to the top kind of mechanic, because those are a little bit of an alienating kind of decisions to have in the game, and they utilize mechanics that are typically taboo, player elimination, in the board game hobby sphere. And so there's a lot of things I think that if you don't like a conflict style game, and if you don't like the idea of potentially having to analyze every turn and what somebody else may do and how that may impact you, there's a lot of decisions to be made here, and I can see why somebody may not like that. But if you understand what this game is, and if you play it with other people who understand what the game is, the experience is going to be amazing every single time. And honestly, for me, the only other thing I'd point out is that this game at 3 players, I had a suspicion that I would like it better than some of the other player counts, and I think for me, the game really shined at 3 players. I'd like to play it more at 3 players to know for sure, but I think that this game is a good game if you have a smaller group or even a larger group, but really that 3 player to be able to work with everybody at the table and everybody is involved. So overall, I think we're all in agreement that this is a great game, and if this is your style of game, pick this one up. You won't regret it. All right, that's been our review of Ankh, Gods of Egypt. Now let's talk a little bit about our top 5 area control games. We've just talked about Ankh, Gods of Egypt, which one of the main mechanics in that is area control. And so we want to see how that stacks up against some of the other games we think do really well with area control. To start us off, Tyler, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Number 5.
Thank you, Tyson. All right. My number 5 is Scythe. Scythe came out in 2016. It was published by Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stegmaier, 1 to 5 players. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this game because it's on someone else's list, and also Scythe is a pretty popular game, but I do love the area control in Scythe. You're obviously throughout the game moving your workers and your mechs and your leader around. I love with the leader that when you move the leader to an encounter token space, you can gain an encounter card and pick various rewards. I think that's really cool. As far as the board, there are some unique spaces on the map. I love the mines and how they're interconnected, and you can kind of jump around on the map and between your own mine if you build that for your faction. And I also love the factory space, which the first time that you gain control of it with your leader, you can choose between extra actions that are available that you will then have for the rest of your game. And then also, it's really cool. And this is something else that I like about Scythe. There's victory points that are awarded at the end of the game for the number of areas that you control. And the factory is actually worth 3 areas. So that can be really cool. But I love the land grab that happens by each player near the end of the game. And there's, your last few turns, you're faced with some really good choices. And one of them is how much should I be spreading out right now to benefit from those area control points. I also think it's really cool that, there's a lot of posturing in Scythe, but when you collect resources in Scythe, they don't go back to your player board. They stay out on the map. And it's kind of fun to see what you can get away with as far as workers that are unprotected but have resources with them. In Scythe, those can be stolen, but there is a penalty if someone murders your workers. And I think that's really cool. But anyway, yeah, Scythe is incredible game, and area control is definitely a big part of it. Kevin, what's your number 5?
So I went back and forth on whether or not to include this game. I haven't played it a whole lot, but the times that I have played it have been fantastic, and I've absolutely loved it. So my number 5 is Blood Rage. Blood Rage is designed by Eric Lang and produced by Cool Mini or Not. It came out in 2015. So in Blood Rage, you control your own Viking clan, as well as a ship, warriors, leaders, and potentially big bad monsters that could come join the fight. You're working towards glory. Whoever gets the most glory wins. You get glory by pillaging the land for its rewards, crushing your opponents in battle, and dying gloriously in Ragnarok. Sounds pretty epic, which I think it is. Blood Rage is a great area control game. The thing that I probably like the most about it is the battle resolution. So it's a card-based battle game. So when you pillage, there's something called a call to arms. So anybody that's in an adjacent area can then join the battle and fight for that area control, which is kind of an interesting concept, and it makes for really interesting battles. The card play is great. When you play a card, you have the opportunity to potentially play another card. It's very unpredictable. You don't know what people are going to play. And as part of that card play, one of the really interesting things is that if you lose that battle, you get that card back, which then you can use in future battles in the same age. Super interesting. You know what that person has. It just causes a lot of really fun experiences. And it's one of those games where you have those stand-up cheering moments, which I always love. So my number 5 is Blood Rage.
My number 5 is going to follow suit in being another CMON game. It's Ethnos, which is maybe not what CMON is usually known for. CMON Cool Mini or Not, right? There's no minis in this game. Ethnos is a 2 to 6 player game designed by Paolo Mori, and it is a very gateway style area control game. The game has been referenced to as being similar to Ticket to Ride in some ways, and the mechanisms that you're using are similar in the card play. You grab cards and then you can lay down a number of cards as if you were to put your tracks down. But instead of putting tracks down on a map in like a horizontal fashion, they're going in a vertical fashion. They're actually stackable little discs, and you're trying to get the most discs in every area on the map. This map is ugly. Like, it's not a good looking game really, but it's actually a very immersive game, I think, because of the way that they've made these different races. So there are 12 different races in the game, and every game you're choosing 6 of those different races that you can use. And there's a lot of really interesting combinations of how those unique races work. They each have different abilities. So there's a ton of like variability in the game that makes me want to play the game more and more. And this is a game that if you've never played area control games before, or honestly, if you haven't played very many hobby board games, this is a good gateway style area control game, which is why it's my number 5 on my list. Ethnos.
Number 4.
All right, so my number 4 is Root, designed by Cole Worley, published by Leader Games, and it has very iconic art by Kyle Farron, and that came out in 2018. And Root isn't necessarily in my top 5 or top 10 favorite area control games, but it is such a central part to the game that I couldn't leave it off the list. The whole game is about taking control of the forest with your animal faction. This game is a blast once your group gets over the asymmetric learning curve. But because it is asymmetric, the factions play so differently, they each manipulate the board spaces and area control differently. This is one of my son's favorite games, and we are all in on Root.
My number 4 is a game that probably has the most ugly box art of all of these games. It's Hansa Teutonica. This game came out in 2009. It's for 2 to 5 players, designed by Andreas Stedding and published by Z-Man Games. Hansa Teutonica, it is probably the definition of a dry Euro.
It's pretty dry.
It's pretty dry, right? When you think of really dry Euros, it's probably you think of this game. And the guy on the cover probably doesn't help that either, right? It's a cube pusher. When I explain this to people, I see their eyes glaze over a little bit, and they're like, this can't be fun, right? But it is really fun. It was my number 1 game for a long time. In Hansa Teutonica, the players, you act as traders, trying to get victory points for building a network of offices, controlling cities, collecting bonus markers, or when other traders use the cities they control. So the game is very much an area control game. You're trying to control these cities. You can lose control of the cities throughout the game. And based on how you do that is how you're going to score. So you get a lot of points for connecting cities, just controlling them themselves. There's a lot to it. And what I really like about it is the multiple paths to victory. After I'd played it 20 times, I was still figuring out things that were new about the game, which was a lot of fun. The push and pull to try and get control of these cities, because if you control them, somebody uses the route right adjacent, you get points. So the really popular places are really fought over. There's, do you gain control of that city, or do you get an additional bonus that comes from not gaining control of that city? So there's a lot of interesting decisions to be made there. I love the game, even though it's not my number 1 anymore. It's still pretty high up there. So that's my number 4, Hansa Teutonica.
I will say Hansa Teutonica has been offered to play in our group a couple of times. Let's play Hansa Teutonica or X game. And I've almost always voted for X game because that box art is hideous, and I just think I can never play it. So I still haven't played it, but it's one that I've thought mechanically is one that I'd be very interested in.
One thing to know, it did just get a recent reprint, which
the deluxe
was
version.
Oh,
right?
it's a deluxe version, all right.
The big box version.
The big box that is as big or smaller than a normal game box, but it does jam in all of the expansion maps. The only additional thing that it adds is a little pad to take your score on at the end of the game. Little disappointing that was the reprint, but I'm glad it's reprinted and it's available for more people to get, because I think a lot of people will like it once they, now that they can get their hands on it.
I was glad that they reprinted it, because I was looking at the eBay prices for a while and didn't pull the trigger. And then the news came that it was coming out. And so, I saved a ton of money.
Yeah, I was happy about it too. I actually got the game for free, which is a great price. And
whatever, Kevin.
the only downside was that the box was just crushed like crazy. And the board on the inside, for the base game, was a little bit damaged. Not a big deal because I got it for free.
But it is free.
But I'm glad that I have a pristine board now that doesn't have this little crunch spot on it. But
Nice.
anyway.
So that was Hansa Teutonica. All right, my number 4 is Spirit Island. Spirit Island is a 1 to 4 player game in which you play as a god, a spirit of this island, obviously, as indicated by the title of the game, trying to control the island and get off these settlers who are trying to colonize the island and damage and take over it in a way that is causing pollution and other terrible things. It's designed by Eric Roos, and it's published by Greater Than Games. I typically do not like what I'd call a pure cooperative game, a la Pandemic, right? This to me, Spirit Island is Pandemic's older brother and has that really pure cooperative feel. But the area control in this is depending on how many players you have like a piece of an island. So if you're playing a 1-player game, you have one piece of island. But if you're playing a 4-player game, you have 4 little sections. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to exclusively control those. But there is so much going on in this board that I think the AI, as it were, for the enemy is so clever in how it comes out and how it controls and tries to take over the map. So one of the really cool things I like about Spirit Island is each spirit gets their own unique deck of cards, and these cards have powers that are like major and minor powers that you can use. And you're trying to customize your deck in a way that makes it so that you can control the map and be as efficient in your section, but you have to rely on your companions, the other spirits on the island, so that you can make sure you're doing everything, because each spirit specializes in a specific type of thing. So like sometimes you have like a spirit that handles the ocean, but the ocean only handles the outside borders of the map and doesn't have a lot of reach to the inner parts of the map. And then other times you have like spirits that are basically mountainous and can control those inner parts of the map in a way that is really efficient, but you have to work together. And the reason I really like this as a cooperative game is that there is no quarterbacking in this game. It's all dependent on your ability to know your own spirit and then take their specialties and make sure you're doing it right. Because anytime I've played the game, we've ended up having to say, I can't focus on any of the stuff you're doing. Can you just please make sure that area is taken care of? Because that's one area that I'm not going to be able to handle. And there's just so much feedback from the game that you have to know your stuff so well. It makes for a really interesting area control game. And it's my only cooperative area control game that I put on this list. And it's probably my favorite cooperative game. So Spirit Island is my number 4.
It's a pretty tough co-op too, right?
Oh,
I mean, it'll beat you up.
I don't know if it's Robinson Crusoe tough.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite on the level of Robinson Crusoe, but it is a severely intense game that it makes it very difficult to beat. And the fact that the base game alone comes with a ton of different modules and other like scenarios that you can put in there to increase the difficulty means that this game is one that you could play over and over and over again, even if you feel like you've quote unquote mastered the base game, which I don't know if you can, because it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I like my co-ops, right? I don't want it to be too easy. I don't want it to be too hard where you never win, though. But I want it to be like when I do beat it, then it's cool.
It feels like an accomplishment.
It feels like an accomplishment. Yeah, there's like people cheering around the table that it's awesome,
Yeah.
you know, that you did it. So that sounds great.
Number 3.
All right, so my number 3 gets a lot of love around this table. It is Dwellings of Eldervale, which came out in 2020. It was published by Breaking Games and designed by Luke Laurie. It's for 1 to 5 players. I guess I wasn't aware of this, but apparently it has a similar mechanic to Blood Rage, where workers and dragons and wizards and adjacent tile spaces can join a battle, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, we've only played it a couple times, but I love the area control in this game. Sometimes you think you're playing peacefully, and then someone attacks you with their dragon, wizard, or other warriors and workers. I love that at certain points in the game, after you've deployed workers, you can turn them into dwellings by physically putting a roof on your meeple. I mean, how cool is that? You now own the space and have a pretty cool looking dwelling. I think after, the first play, we realized, hey, it's not really necessarily, this game isn't really about the battles, right? You don't have to win the battles to win. It's more about your area control and action selection, and when you select new tiles to play, how you feed off of the bonuses that you get from the dwellings that you've created on the map. So that's my number 3, Dwellings of Eldervale.
Yeah, this is one I would like to play again.
Would you?
I would. Yeah, I think so. I am undefeated in our 2 plays.
Well, every time I ask, I
together.
suggested it. Never. I mean, it's that, same thing with Hansa Teutonica, right? I bring it up, and it never gets any votes.
Well,
so.
I mean, like you mentioned, I think the first play, I thought battle was a lot more important than it actually was. So my rolls were horrible.
And you were pretty frustrated.
Oh, I was super frustrated. I thought I was going to get destroyed.
And who won?
Well, yeah, me.
Okay.
Yeah,
I won.
Contrast that with the next game you guys played with me, which I didn't want to be in any battles, but it was a 5-player game, so it was hard not to be in battles. But I ended up being in pretty much almost every single battle, whether or not I wanted to, and then I ended up losing terribly because I couldn't get I got like maybe 1 or 2 dwellings out the entire game, and it was rough. It's one that I definitely want to try again.
I feel like, having only played a few times, I feel like there's still more to explore there.
The production quality on this game is
it's awesome.
phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. It looks awesome.
And I didn't quite get the legendary version of it, so I don't have the monster bases that make
sound effects.
Yeah, sound effects, but that would be pretty awesome.
Of overproduced.
Yeah.
Right?
I kind of wish you had.
Yeah, I totally wish you would have bought that. That would have been amazing.
I'll throw together an app or something and make my own.
Yeah.
That's my number 3, Dwellings of Eldervale.
My number 3 is Memoir 44. This is a game designed by Richard Borg, produced by Days of Wonder. It plays up to 8 players. The majority of the time you play, it will be a 2-player war game, but you can play up to 8 players. Like I said, this is a war game. It's it recreates historical battles from World War II. It is definitely, I think, an area control game, like a lot of war games are. It's a scenario-based war game. So a lot of the scenarios will be objectives where you're controlling a city, for example, or you're controlling an area of the board. You're fortified, and the enemy is going to come try and get you out of those fortifications for a victory point medal type of thing. It's a card-based war game. It's a very simple war game. A lot of times when you think of war games, you think of these big, long, drawn-out games with chits on the board and counters and all that kind of stuff. This is very much not that type of game. It's simple card play, but I think there's a lot of depth to it. There's a million expansions, so you can go as deep as you want into Memoir 44. I have gone very deep into Memoir 44, so I have most of the expansions. But it's each expansion, each army adds something a little different. A rule that kind of tweaks the basic rules, which is kind of fun. It keeps it interesting. It keeps it fresh. It's a game I really like. We recently played an Overlord scenario, which
that was awesome.
Yeah, which is pretty epic. You get up to 4 people on a side. We had six players there, and just seeing that big board laid out with all the little miniatures on there that you're moving around and fighting and stuff is pretty cool.
It had quite the table presence for that game, and that was the first time I'd actually played the game, and I was on Kevin's team, and we ended up losing like terribly because the odds were all stacked against us anyway. But even losing that game, I was like, that was a great experience. I don't know if it would meet my top area controls game, but I think if you like war games, like on the simpler side, more board games, this is great. And it has a lot of, I love the history in this one a lot, like that it really ties in the history very well.
Yeah, our buddy our buddy Mark came over. He looked at the scenario and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is this battle from this, and this is what happened." And he started giving the history of the whole battle.
Well,
I'm like, "Well, that's awesome." You know, and it is historical. It's based on actual battles, so you are learning something.
He kind of took that game over. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he was calling the shots, and I think,
Oh yeah,
if I remember, somebody on your team decides which cards get divvied out to their teammates, and he was that person, and he set us up, and he was tactical and strategic, and I think he was the large part of the reason we won. So
yeah. I was that guy on the other team. That's probably a large reason.
I agree.
To why we lost. You agree? Yeah. Well, there you go. Like you said, it was stacked. The thing about that game is very asymmetrical, and because it's based on actual battles, you know, there's a side that has a little bit of an advantage. But when you're the underdogs and you actually pull it out, it's awesome.
this is going to come into my number one here in a second. Underdogs versus
foreshadowing.
Yep.
All right. That's my number 3, Memoir 44.
Speaking of really historically accurate games, my number 3 is Cry Havoc. Not at all historically accurate. Cry Havoc is a 2 to 4 player game designed by Grant Rodiak and 2 Polish designers that I'm going to butcher their names, but I'll give it a shot. Michal Orax and Michal Walzak. Yep, that's how I'm going to go with that. I apologize if you ever listen to this podcast.
they won't.
Not a chance.
I apologize to any Polish listeners who may ever listen to this.
Still
podcast.
probably not going to happen.
Right. I'm just generally apologizing.
I just generally apologize. That works. Yeah.
It's also published by Portal Games, which is a Polish publisher. So if we tag them, maybe they'll see the post. Cry Havoc, like I said, super not historically accurate. The theme behind this is what caught my attention is it reminded me a lot of StarCraft when I first saw it. And I played a lot of StarCraft growing up. And I feel like there's your Protoss and your Zerg type of factions in this game, but it's asymmetrical, and there's 4 different types of factions in this game, and you are battling over an alien planet in which, kind of like Avatar, the James Cameron film that came out, you've got a native race that is on the planet, and they're trying to defend their homeland, and so they can travel around and have asymmetric abilities that allows them to get around the map a lot better than other ones. Then you have other types of factions that all have different abilities. One of the things I really like about this game is it's a multi-use card game, which has some really clever card play in it. But that area control of the game is so essential because you have crystals and you have other things on the board that make it desirable to do it. And then the battle mechanic is one of the best battle mechanics I've seen, in that you have different stages of battle, and the timing of when things happen reminds me a little bit of like Ankh in some of the card play that you have in Ankh, what we talked about. They're not, it's the feeling they're not similar in actual execution of how they work, but that thought process of, well, if I play this at this time, then they can do this. So what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? It adds this really interesting dynamic that I really like. I have not played this one in a long time, but I really, really like that one, which is why it's my number 3, Cry Havoc.
Number 2.
All right, so my number 2 is a brand new spanking game that came out in 2021. You may have heard it.
A spanking one.
All right. So my number 2 is a new game. It's the new hotness in 2021. You may have heard of it. It's Ankh, Gods of Egypt. If you haven't heard of it, please rewind about an hour of this podcast and start over. That's my number 2, Ankh, Gods of Egypt.
My number 2 is a game that we've already talked about. It is Scythe. So Tyler already kind of explained how this game works, who designed it, and all that good stuff. Well, yeah, a little bit.
I'm sure you
gave the listeners a taste of what Scythe is about. I think a lot of people already have some experience with this one. I think it's a great area control game. As far as area control goes, I like how there's the threat of battle at all times, but there's really not a ton of battle in this game. So you're positioning yourself around the board, getting resources, and threatening people all the time. And you may not even attack them. I think it's interesting how you can only, in most factions, you can only get 2 stars from battle. So that's not going to be the focus for most people. Sometimes, you can win the game without battling at all. But that threat that's always there is really interesting. And it creates kind of a cool dynamic in the game, I think. A cool area control dynamic. So that's my number 2, Scythe.
Keeping with the theme of games that have already been said on this list, my number 2 is also Ankh. And if you haven't heard enough about it already, I won't belabor the point. Ankh, number 2.
Number 1.
So my number 1 is a game that came out in 2016. This is absolutely in my top 5 games of all time. It is Star Wars Rebellion, designed by Corey Konieczka and published by Fantasy Flight Games. You can play with 2v2 on teams, but I prefer to play 1v1, and it's by far my favorite 1v1 game. I absolutely love this game. I grew up a Star Wars nerd, and for a Star Wars fan, this game is epic. It has a huge table presence. You got the whole galaxy with the most widely known planets in the universe laid out before you, covered in AT-ATs and Star Destroyers and a Death Star and Stormtroopers and X-Wings, Y-Wings, and any other units from the universe that you can think of, all splayed out across the board. Area control is at the heart of this game, and the vastly overpowered Empire player hunts across the galaxy's planets for the elusive, hidden rebel base so that they can squash the rebellion before the rebellion can gain enough of a following in the galaxy to defeat the Empire. The area control aspect of this game is it's awesome. I mean, if you want to build specific types of units, whether you're the rebels or the Empire, you have to control specific planets. And not only that, but you have to protect the ones that you want to maintain. I love that as the rebels, you're constantly trying to evade the Empire, but also you're trying to sabotage them and do anything you can to be a thorn in their side. On the flip side of that, as the Empire, you're trying to hunt down planet by planet, ruling them out until you can find the rebel base, which of course can be moved during the game. I just love that this is the ultimate area control tug of war for my favorite galaxy far, far away. Have you guys played Star Wars Rebellion?
I've played it one time.
Are you a Star Wars nerd?
I would qualify myself in that category. And I played it one time, probably about 5 years ago, somewhere around there. And I was not impressed with it. But that could have been a rules teach issue, or that could have been just not understanding it. I'll have to give it another try. I'd like to play this with you.
Awesome. I'd love to play. And for me, the expansion, the battle system with just the base game, it's not my favorite, but the expansion changes it a little bit with adding in some extra dice and changing the cards that you have available to you. This game's awesome. Area control all the way. I love when you're the rebels and you're trying to decide, where to put your base. If the Empire's getting close to finding it, you can move across the galaxy. Love trying to decide where you are going to sabotage the Empire's planets so that they produce fewer goods. You can blow up the Death Star if you want. It's awesome. Oh, and the Death Star blows up planets too. How cool is that, right?
That's awesome.
Very
right?
thematic. So That's my number one, Star Wars Rebellion.
Yeah, I've played it one time. It's I liked it. I'm a Star Wars nerd as well, but it's been a while. I think I'd like to get back to it, try it out again. I think the listeners also want to know the last 3 Star Wars movies, which are clearly the best of the 3. How do you feel? How do you feel about those? Right? I mean, the listeners want to know.
Well, you heard earlier how I feel about Lost Ruins of Arnak. So,
So great. That's what I'm
So
hearing.
you love them, right? Yeah. I mean,
I think without getting fired up, I think that episodes 7 through 9 are better left unwatched.
I
disagree.
actually don't mind them.
Yeah.
I mean,
My
I think
favorite part is when Luke is completely emasculated in episode 8.
That's what I said. There were definite missteps, I think, in those 3 movies. But
Oh, hey, remember all those plot lines that we had going in episode 7? We're going to get rid of those in the first 10 minutes of episode 8. And then we're going to do it again at the beginning of episode 9.
as you can see, it doesn't take much to get Tyler worked up about the last 3 movies. But
Oh my gosh.
That's a discussion we could probably go on and on. I have differing opinions. If we wanted to start a Star Wars podcast, I think that we could handle that.
We probably could.
another podcast, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Let's try and get at least a couple dozen subscribers out of this one first, and then we'll move on.
Agreed.
Done. Yeah.
Well, my number 1 is a game that we have already discussed. The new hotness, as Tyler mentioned, which is Ankh.
Monster. Oh.
Oh, no, not Monster Crunch. Now, if Monster Crunch came out with an area control version, I'm all over it.
Oh my gosh.
But no, my number 1 is Ankh. And I will pass it over to Tyson.
My number 1 has also been discussed, but I do want to talk a little bit about it. It was number 5 on Kevin's list. My number 1 is Blood Rage. Now, I put this one specifically above Ankh because I do like this one better. I think that in comparison, they're both first off great games, as I've obviously said in this podcast enough about Ankh. Blood Rage, I think, as an area control game, does it better. And the focus is, I think, more on area control in Blood Rage than it is in Ankh. But they both are really great in that regard. I love that in Blood Rage, you can play the game and you have all of these choices, and the way you thought you were playing at the start of the game can quickly change. You can go in and be like, oh, I have to switch my tactics. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in a terrible situation. And I love that that can happen with the card drafting in the game. It's really fantastic that you can look and see, okay, here are my options. If I take this card, here's where it happened, where I can go with it here. But if I take that one, I can do this. And the hate draft is real in that you can play the game and make sure that if I don't take that card, Kevin's going to end up with the card that could really, really make the game for him. There are so many different strategies in this game. And what I think is better, I think I would never need to play anything more than the base game of this, but I would absolutely love to play more of it. But the base game is, in and of itself, just really, really great, I think. And I think it does a great job at having area control and making sure that you have multiple places on the map that are always under contention, and that I love that you're playing to go into an area and you could be going into that area to make a ruse. Like, I love the idea of going into the area saying, I'm going to start a battle in here because I want these other people to come here and fight for this area, really, so that I can get them out of a different area and then get in there. And I think there's some really fun dynamics in the way that area control is handled in Blood Rage, which is why it's my number 1, Blood Rage.
So I haven't played Blood Rage, like I said earlier, and I would love to play it. When you were talking for that last little bit, I felt like a lot of those things also apply to Ankh in a lot of ways.
I don't disagree. I think Blood Rage does the area control better. Whereas, I think in Ankh, one of the things that's great is that card play and making those decisions for each conflict. But I love that each area can have its own value, and there's fewer areas in Blood Rage. So because there's only a certain amount of areas, and as the map kind of reduces in size during Ragnarok every age, you end up having a smaller space. So the areas in the game are far more contestable and far more important to you, as opposed to Ankh, where there's a ton of different hexes and you can create new areas and things like that. So it's more on the opposite side, where Blood Rage is shrinking, your space is shrinking. Cool. Ankh is actually, by the end of the game, expanding to having more areas.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting to see the similarities between the two games. And I haven't played Rising Sun, but I would imagine. Have either of you guys played Rising Sun?
I've played Rising Sun.
And I'm sure there's similarities in that to the other two games as well. Yeah. I mean, I'd be very interested to play that. I like how you talked about the card drafting. That's one of my absolute favorite mechanisms in that game, and in any game, really. I love that, card drafting. And the interesting decisions, like you said, it's like, I really need this card. This fits in my strategy. But if I give this card up, I know that Tyson, it's just going to kill me. So I have to take this card. So hate drafting is a big part of it, right? And that decision making is awesome. I think I love that.
That's cool.
So altogether, this is our top 5 list for area control games. You've heard it all, why we all have put Ankh on here. Obviously, we like Ankh. You've heard enough of that in our review. But beyond that, we think Ankh as an area control game deserves a spot in your collection potentially. So if any of these sound interesting, feel free to check them out. That's our top 5. Now let's talk a little bit about what we're excited about and what's going on maybe in our own gaming lives, what's going on in the gaming industry as a whole that has got us excited. Kevin, what's on your mind?
I'm excited about a lot of things. One of those is Unfathomable. We've seen it out in the wild a little bit in Europe, not quite reached here yet, but I'm excited to get my hands on it and start playing. I've played a little bit of Battlestar Galactica. It's like a souped up version of Shadows over Camelot. It takes that traitor mechanism and really beefs it up with, the Cylons and who's a Cylon and accusing people. And I'm excited to see it in a Cthulhu environment, right? That theme really kind of grabs me a little bit more than Battlestar Galactica. So I'm excited to see what they do with it. I'm excited to play it with our group because I think it's really going to shine with our group. I think it's really something I'm looking forward to.
I've been following on a little bit with this as well, and I'm not nearly as tight into. I almost finished a game of Battlestar Galactica once, but my biggest complaint was it was long. And my hope with Unfathomable would be that maybe it streamlined it a little bit and made it go quicker, but I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that's the case. I was looking at it earlier today, and it has a 2 to 4 hour playtime. So I'm not well, and for our group, maybe that's 4 to 6 hours. I don't know. We'll see, but hopefully it's more towards the 3 hour mark because it is. That was one of the things about Battlestar is it was pretty long. Right?
Yeah. But it's got all the right stuff in it,
right?
That I really like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I'm excited about that I've only got a little bit of information on is a game called Unconscious Mind. Have either of you heard about Unconscious Mind?
I haven't.
No, not at all.
So I wouldn't have heard about this except for it's designed by Johnny Pack Canton, who did Coloma, Sierra West, all these other great games that are coming out. He's been on a streak, and I've really appreciated a lot of his stuff. Additionally, Johnny Pack and I started in a Facebook group with him that he hosts for Euro board games, and he talks a lot about these Euro board games, and there's a lot of good conversation there. Well, he ended up inviting me, and I'm assuming everybody else in that group, to this Unconscious Mind Facebook page, and he is one of the designers on it. Now, here's the other thing that I think that the two of you will maybe get excited about. The artists on this game are Andrew Bosley and Vincent Dutrait. So Johnny Pack, Andrew Bosley, Vincent Dutrait, these are all kind of big names. Andrew Bosley did Tapestry, Everdell, all those really pretty games. Vincent Dutrait did Robinson Crusoe, and I like 100 other ones, and I can't even think of them. They're probably on this wall I'm looking at right here. But their art plus Johnny Pack's mechanics, and there's a couple of other designers on here I haven't heard, Laskus, Yoma, and Antonio Zax. They've designed a few other things, but I feel like this team has a lot of potential. Essentially what Unconscious Mind is, it's a game where you're playing as a psychotherapist in the 1900s, which is a theme I don't think I've ever heard of, literally Sigmund Freud's group of psychotherapists. But I just want to read one part of the description that like really got me excited. Each turn you activate all of the therapeutic technique cards you have in a given row. I don't know what most of this stuff means, but these therapeutic cards in a given row of your notebook marked by your ink pot. Again, stuff I don't know. Then you send a figure to one of the various action spaces in Vienna, spending time and moving your ink pot to pay the cost, which determines which row of your notebook will be activated at the start of your next turn. So it's a worker placement game. You're placing stuff out there. Over the course of the game, your office will be visited by many Viennese citizens, and once they have been healed, they can happily return to their occupations, which opens up more action spaces in Vienna for players to use. So essentially, the thing that really excites me about this game is that you're healing people in Vienna, and as you heal those people, they go back to their jobs in Vienna and open their shops back up because their mental health is better. And so now you have more action spaces available because of the people that you earlier in the game did. I don't know much more about it than that, other than it's got really pretty pictures and it's a great design team.
When is it supposed to be available?
From what I've seen, it's I think Johnny Pack in a Facebook page said it's probably January, February time when it will launch on Kickstarter.
Nice. Sounds cool.
So the unconscious mind coming in 2022 is something I'm excited about. What about you, Tyler?
I'm excited about Praga Kaputrekny. I don't know if that's how you say it, but this is Vladimir Suchi's game that came out, 2020, I think, maybe 2019. We had the opportunity to play it once the other night, and Tyson destroyed us. Dan was a close second, and Kevin and I were fighting over last, I think. But that game, that first play, just kind of blew my mind. Like, there is so much to explore here, and I can't wait to get that game back on the table. So that's number one. Number two is a few expansions. I like my expansions. First, Teotihuacan Time of Seth. I love Teotihuacan, and I hope to get that to the table more. And I think that Time of Seth, the expansion, is just going to take it to the next level for me. I'm also excited about the next Dune Imperium, or the first Dune Imperium expansion, Rise of Ix. I think that game is phenomenal, and adding a few more factions and some different cards is going to be awesome. I'm excited for that. And also Lost Ruins of Arnak's first expansion. Hopefully
It improves an already stellar game.
Right?
Right?
Yes. No, I've gone back and forth. We talked earlier about these two games, right? I've been debating whether or not to keep Lost Ruins of Arnak on my shelf and whether or not it'll actually get to the table again. So I'm hoping that this expansion will take it to the next level for me if I don't cancel my order for the expansion.
If it doesn't, I'll take your copy off your hands.
Heresy.
So those are things I'm excited about. I'm definitely excited to finally get Ankh. I'm excited for you guys to stop teasing me that I don't have my Ankh copy
Literally,
yet.
it's been like 2.5 months. Why don't you have your copy yet?
Yeah, right?
I mean, this is terrible.
I'm still expecting it to show up in French.
Yeah, I've had my copy of Ankh and sold my copy of Ankh in the time that it's taken for you to get yours.
I know, and the fact that you sold it, I still, I can't believe that happened.
The only reason I sold it was because we were never going to play my copy of Ankh. It had less stuff in it than your copy of Ankh.
It was an inferior copy.
It was. And I rated it a 5. I love the game. But the only people I'm going to be playing Ankh with are the three of you and anybody else in our group who may want, or two of you. I don't know how to count. There's three of us on this. I know how to. This is why I lose games.
Counting's
Sometimes
hard.
counting's rough.
We have to keep an eye on Tyson for this reason too.
Yeah, because counting is hard in games as well.
Well, that happened in Quacks like 8 times. Tyler had to fix my counting every time.
Right. I'm also like Teotihuacan is great. I love Teotihuacan. I do want to play it more for sure. I haven't explored that game nearly enough, but any expansions are great.
Yeah.
Like anytime you have more of a game that you already like,
Yep.
Is fantastic. So
And sometimes
I'm also looking forward to that.
Sometimes they fall flat, right?
Sometimes they do.
All right. So one more thing I'm excited about is our board game weekend is coming up in a month. And I've been looking forward to this for about 6 months that we've had it planned, right? 4 or 5, 6 months.
Yeah, even longer than that with the pandemic, right? We couldn't get together forever. So this is going to be fantastic.
So there's 6 of us in total going up to Winter Park, Colorado for 3 nights and 4 days. And we are going to play some games, and maybe in episode 2 or 3, we'll come back and talk about some of the games we played on our board game weekend. And I can't wait.
Yeah, we've done this one other time, right before the pandemic, and we had all talked about, well, this would be great. Let's do it again real soon. Pandemic strikes. We've had to wait until a year and a half, almost 2 years later now at this point, and I'm super excited for it as well. It's I haven't had a real vacation in a fair amount of time, so this is kind of my first vacation in a while, and I couldn't think of a better one.
Yeah, I think back to that other, board game weekend we did, and there were so many like tied games or close games or just awesome games.
Yeah.
We played a game of Tapestry. Was that the one that we played, and you came back like 100 points in the last round or something like that to
tie for
it up,
the win,
and
and you ended up taking that win.
and then I won by 1 point, like on the tiebreaker. I don't remember what the tiebreaker was, but it was epic. There are so many fun games. I think this weekend is just going to be the same. It's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it.
So last time we went, we had an abundance of games. We're going to do some pre-trip rankings and try and select games from that we're playing, and hopefully we'll mitigate taking so many games that don't get played, and we can focus on the ones that we do. But yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
And maybe this time we'll get more of your games played.
Yeah.
Right, Tyson?
Yeah. It would be great to play a game that I've ever brought.
You know what game I've always wanted to play?
Oh, I know.
You know?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Adrenaline, right?
Yeah. Always you've wanted to play that game. It's a great game.
It's like a first-person shooter, but in a board game, right?
Now you just make it sound terrible.
No, I'm
sure it's a great game.
No, I'm sure
My
it's a
son
great
had
game.
fun playing.
We give you a hard time, but I'm sure it's an awesome game.
Yeah.
So we could definitely put that on the list.
All right, so that wraps up the things that we're excited about. We did have one more thing that we didn't mention that we're going to talk about. Do you want to take that, Tyson?
So every episode, we're going to go ahead and offer up a longest turn award. And this episode, we actually have a tie for the longest turn in playing Ankh. And that goes to Tyler and Kevin for taking 30 minutes to finish the final conflict. No disputes. After this
allegedly.
After this adrenaline nonsense.
Who was keeping track of the time?
I was. Because I wasn't playing. I was just sitting there watching for 30 minutes.
Only a few people fell asleep while we were taking our turn.
It
was a little bit long.
Yeah.
So, longest turn award, Kevin and Tyler. Let's see if you can hold on to your title for the next episode.
Thank you. This is quite an honor.
Thank
you.
Well, it is, and I really feel like it's going to be a rare occurrence because most of our games Tyson's playing with us.
Right. So we'll take this one. I'm sure you'll get the crown back soon enough.
Be sure to join us in our next episode. Hopefully we didn't scare you away this episode. But if you'd like to find out more about the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast, feel free to join our Board Game Geek Guild number 3947. Check us out on Instagram, on Facebook. We're going to be sure to have more stuff as we go on. Thanks again for joining us, and have a lovely week.
Enjoy your day.
All right. Welcome to the
Please no more. Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Loud noises.
Dune Imperium. Best gaming experience I've ever had.
What about my King Tut one?
That was better.
You remember that one?
No,
Oh.
but I do remember it being better.
How does King Tut get all the ladies? With all of his pheromones.
Yeah, that was.
Ugh, my back's bugging me. I need to go see the chiropractor. No?
No, that's
Nothing.
Still terrible.
He's not going to laugh, no matter how funny it is. Which Egyptian god is the worst at video games? Anubis.
Anubis was in my head, but I was like, but why is it Anubis? Why is it Anubis?
Because he's a noob.
Noob.
Dune Imperium. Best gaming experience I've ever had.
I like games.
Teotihuacan.